Chapter 271, A Victory and a Secret. After some negotiation with Blake, Snape ended up empty-handed. All the basilisk remains were claimed by Blake. The reason was straightforward. Snape had no use for them. Despite his extensive knowledge of potion recipes, none required basilisk parts. The idea of experimenting to discover new potion properties and develop innovative formulas was easier said than done. Only someone as uniquely talented as Blake could find such research as simple as eating. Snape, despite his considerable skill in potion making, couldn't compete with Blake's unconventional methods. Moreover, without Blake's insight, Snape wouldn't have even considered the basilisk materials valuable. Consequently, Snape felt utterly outmaneuvered, a frustration not even 3 bottles of joy potion could alleviate. "Now that the basilisk issue is resolved," Dumbledore began, sitting behind his desk with a visible sense of relief, "we can expect the students to return after the holiday without concern." Professor McGonagall, too, shared a smile. The fear of a monster lurking within the school had weighed heavily on everyone's hearts. Now, with the matter settled, relief was palpable. "However, there's still the matter of the school board," McGonagall mentioned, her worry resurfacing. "It's under control, Minerva," Dumbledore reassured her. "They are aware of the situation, but we've kept it from becoming public knowledge. The board agrees that revealing the existence of the basilisk and the Chamber of Secrets could tarnish Hogwarts' reputation." Dumbledore's expression turned grave. In the past, he might have used the incident to highlight Blake's achievements. However, the emergence of Grindelwald's Nurmengard Magic Academy openly competing for students changed the stakes. Revealing the basilisk could incite fear of other hidden dangers, potentially driving students to Nurmengard. Thus, the decision was made to keep the chamber and its monster a secret. A polite knock on the oak door interrupted their discussion. "Please come in," Dumbledore invited. Blake entered, a broad grin on his face. "You've never knocked before," Dumbledore observed, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Perhaps I'm in an exceptionally good mood today," Blake replied, his smile so wide his eyes were nearly closed. The basilisk had provided him with valuable materials, especially the potent venom, far stronger than any toxin he had encountered before. No wonder it could destroy Horcruxes. "It seems Severus assisted you with the basilisk?" Dumbledore inquired. "Indeed." Blake recalled Snape's reluctant assistance in the Chamber of Secrets, which only added to his amusement. Dumbledore chuckled, understanding the dynamic between the two. "I have no objections to you taking the basilisk remains. Severus has informed me of your new potion formula. I hope you'll continue to excel." In that moment, Dumbledore was not the century's greatest wizard, but a proud elder, encouraging a promising young talent. "Don't worry, I will definitely continue to push the boundaries," Blake assured him, his enthusiasm undimmed by the challenges ahead. "Make this legacy left by Slytherin play its due role." Hearing Blake refer to the basilisk as Slytherin's legacy, Dumbledore couldn't help but feel a bit helpless, though he couldn't deny the accuracy of the statement. "You always have your own way of thinking, Blake. I advised you against rushing in today, yet you proceeded and even managed to swiftly deal with the basilisk. It's time I acknowledge your capabilities. I've always wanted to protect you, but it seems I really shouldn't have." Dumbledore's words were filled with genuine astonishment at Blake's actions that evening. He had come to the realization that it was time to start treating Blake as an accomplished adult wizard, rather than the inexperienced second-year student he appeared to be. Blake's prowess was indeed commendable. "Well, you can now go home and enjoy your vacation," Dumbledore continued. "You have 2.5 days off. I believe Miss Worley or Miss Granger would be delighted to have you visit." Blake's smile momentarily stiffened. "Ahem, of course. But let's not forget what needs to be done before we can enjoy the holiday." "Are you referring to Hagrid?" Dumbledore inquired. "Yes, I believe it's time for Hagrid's name to be cleared," Blake said, pulling out a cube-shaped glass container from his pocket. Inside the container was a massive yellow eyeball. "Is that a basilisk's eye?" Dumbledore noticed the marks on the eyeball. "Indeed. When the Ministry of Magic sees this, they should understand what truly killed Myrtle," Blake explained, placing the basilisk's eyeball on Dumbledore's desk. As long as we discreetly inform the relevant authorities about the Chamber of Secrets, we can keep the incident under wraps. That's excellent. Dumbledore's face lit up with relief. With this evidence, Hagrid's innocence will undoubtedly be proven. That's the plan. But remember, I'm lending this to you, and I'll need it back eventually, Blake added. Don't worry, do you think I would mishandle your belongings? Dumbledore replied with a chuckle. Besides, this item is of no use to anyone but you. After receiving a satisfactory response, Blake was about to leave when something caught his eye, causing the corners of his mouth to turn up slightly. The Sorting Hat was dozing off, pondering over the song it would sing at the next year's sorting ceremony, when it suddenly felt a chill. Opening its eyes, it saw Blake, the last person it wanted to encounter. Ahem, good day, Blake. Is there something you need from me? The Sorting Hat stammered, clearly nervous. I must warn you, my abilities are limited, and I may not be of much help. Blake's interest in the Sorting Hat wasn't because he needed its assistance. He remembered that the sword of Gryffindor could be summoned through this hat, though he wasn't sure if the sword was actually hidden inside it or if the hat merely acted as a conduit. The Sorting Hat was now visibly anxious, especially since Blake hadn't responded and was giving it a rather unsettling look. Dumbledore, noticing Blake's interest in the hat, couldn't help but be curious. What's the matter? He asked. Blake replied, When I walked past the Sorting Hat, I sensed something unusual about it. A spider, perhaps? Dumbledore asked, somewhat puzzled. Blake was surprised by Dumbledore's question. Didn't Dumbledore know about the hat's connection to the sword of Gryffindor? It seemed unlikely. If Blake hadn't intervened, it would have been Harry, facing the basilisk. Fawkes had sensed Harry's loyalty to Dumbledore and sent him the Sorting Hat, from which he drew the sword to slay the beast. It appeared that Dumbledore might not have been aware that Fawkes's act of sending the hat was entirely its own initiative, motivated by Harry's loyalty. The sword of Gryffindor. So, it was Fawkes who revealed that the sword of Gryffindor was concealed within the Sorting Hat. Blake realized that further speculation was futile. He lifted the ancient hat and, despite the Sorting Hat's continuous grumbling, began a thorough examination. Nothing? Blake scrutinized every crease of the Sorting Hat, finding no magic that could conceal objects. Just as he was about to consult Fawkes, a realization struck him. The sword of Gryffindor. It appears only to those who truly embody the virtues of Gryffindor, and only in their time of need. Blake felt he possessed at least a trace of Gryffindor's bravery. So with renewed determination, he reached into the Sorting Hat. Oh, please don't. It tickles, though a little scratch here and there feels rather nice. The Sorting Hat murmured, sounding surprisingly content. As Blake delved deeper, his skill and performance mastery was triggered, enhancing the fervent hypnosis in his mind. With occlumency, he magnified this emotion exponentially. I'm in peril and require assistance. I've encountered an insurmountable obstacle. If only there was something here to aid me. Suddenly, Blake's fingers brushed against a cold, hard object. Overjoyed, he grasped the sword's hilt and pulled with all his might. With a resonant clang, he extracted an exquisite silver sword adorned with red gems from the Sorting Hat. Oh, that feels wonderful, the Sorting Hat exclaimed, sounding blissfully relieved. I've always felt something was amiss over the years. It turns out this was inside me all along. Blake, holding the sword, felt a surge of triumph. His desire for the sword wasn't out of need, but from the satisfaction of unraveling a mystery. Ding! A shock emotion detected. Ding! Congratulations to the host for acquiring a golden treasure chest. Dumbledore, observing from the sidelines, gazed at the sword in astonishment. This is the sword of Gryffindor. This sword has been lost for many years. I never imagined it was hidden within the hat. The sword of Gryffindor, feeling somewhat indignant, thought to itself, where's the promised danger? Where's the promised challenge? I've been duped. This unexpected turn of events left everyone in awe as Blake stood there, the legendary sword in hand, a testament to his ingenuity and the mysterious ways of the magical world. Chapter 272, Mr. Whirly. Must I discuss my little cotton-padded jacket's leak? Dumbledore carefully took the sword from Blake's grasp, examining it with a keen eye. I was aware that after Gryffindor's passing, the goblins sought to reclaim this sword, he began. Subsequently, it vanished within the confines of Hogwarts. Many speculated that the goblins had indeed retrieved it. However, I've always held the belief that the sword remained here, merely concealed in a location beyond our discovery. I never anticipated it was hidden within the sorting hat. Wait, it appears I was mistaken. Upon closer inspection, a look of realization dawned on Dumbledore's face. I understand now. The sword wasn't hidden in the hat after all. It resides in a secret place, accessible only through a special teleportation magic. The sorting hat merely serves as a conduit to summon it. Once the sword is teleported, the magic enabling its movement vanishes. It seems that only those who truly embody the spirit of Gryffindor can call upon it through the hat and successfully retrieve it. This must have been difficult for you to discern. Dumbledore cast a puzzled glance at Blake, who simply smiled in response. It's just a hunch. I've had these odd intuitions ever since I can remember, Blake explained, attributing the unexplainable to his gut feeling. Dumbledore didn't dwell on it further. Blake's life was filled with enough magical anomalies that one more super-accurate intuition hardly seemed out of place. I've examined this sword and noticed it possesses a peculiar property akin to a base metal, Blake mentioned, setting the sorting hat aside and taking the sword of Gryffindor back from Dumbledore. It has the unique ability to absorb substances that can fortify it. Blake produced a small glass bottle containing a dark green liquid. Upon opening it, he gestured with his hand, and a drop of the liquid flew from the bottle, landing on the sword's blade. Miraculously, the liquid vanished upon contact. "What is that?" Dumbledore inquired, intrigued. "Basilisk venom," Blake revealed. "Dare I ask if you've neutralized the poison?" "No," Blake clarified. "The sword only assimilates what enhances its strength. The basilisk venom I possess does precisely that. Thus, the sword absorbed it upon contact." Dumbledore questioned, "Will the sword retain the venom's toxicity?" "No, the sword itself isn't poisonous. It merely absorbed the venom's destructive capabilities. For instance, if it couldn't destroy Horcruxes before, it now possesses the enhanced power to do so," Blake elucidated. "Is that so?" Dumbledore murmured, retrieving a crown from his robes and taking the sword from Blake once more. "Let's test the sword. This Horcrux holds no value to you, correct?" "Professor, please reconsider. That's a historical artifact," Blake protested, attempting to dissuade Dumbledore's impulsive action. "Even so, to obliterate the Horcrux, we must." "I can extract its residual soul without damaging the artifact," Blake interjected, placing his palm on the crown and drawing out a dark mist. However, since Blake had sealed the Horcrux using undead magic, Voldemort's remnant soul remained dormant within the mass of black energy, unmoving. "This sword cannot sever a soul," Dumbledore noted with a hint of disappointment, handing the sword back to Blake. He then pointed the Elder Wand at the black mist, and with a flick, an orange-red flame emerged, incinerating the black mist instantly. Dumbledore's use of Gubrathian fire demonstrated its own destructive power, akin to the enhanced sword's capabilities. In the realm of magical curses, the fire curse stands out for its lethal potency, capable of inflicting damage that not even a soul body can evade. Dumbledore, a master of Gubrathian fire, recognized the spark of understanding in Blake's eyes and remarked, "I had planned to introduce you to this spell in a few years, but it seems you've already mastered it on your own, haven't you?" After his meeting with the headmaster, Blake utilized a dim, enchional gate to send Nagini safely back home. Dumbledore, preoccupied with Hagrid's rehabilitation and bogged down by the Ministry of Magic's notorious inefficiency, found himself unable to return home for the foreseeable future. Left to his own devices, Blake decided against visiting Hermione or Cassandra, fully aware that his presence could potentially cause more trouble than it was worth, especially considering the explosive potential of revealing his whereabouts to certain individuals. Determined to continue his magical explorations, Blake used the dimensional door to access the Room of Requirement in a manner unique to him. The room, ever responsive to the desires of its visitors, transformed itself according to Blake's wishes without requiring him to lift a finger. In no time, a new door appeared, leading to an empty laboratory that soon filled with various materials Blake retrieved from his system warehouse, treasures collected from numerous adventures. With a new blueprint in hand and the Gubrathian fire at his command, Blake embarked on an ambitious alchemical project. By the next day, a massive oval-shaped glass container, a biological petri dish, stood completed in the laboratory. This device, a pinnacle of ultimate biotechnology, was designed to recreate life forms from their genetic materials, a capability Blake had yet to explore due to previous constraints. Now, with an ample supply of basilisk blood at his disposal, Blake contemplated the possibility of cultivating a new basilisk. However, the basilisk from the Chamber of Secrets, with its formidable but uncontrollable gaze, was deemed a flawed specimen by Blake's standards. If he were to undertake this project, he aimed to create a basilisk that was not only more powerful, but also under his control, avoiding the pitfalls of creating an uncontrollable monster, as often depicted in Tales of Pandora's Box. Undeterred by the potential risks, Blake proceeded to pour a small bottle of basilisk blood into the petri dish, supplementing it with the blood of other formidable creatures, including a great black dragon, a venomous leopard, and even the mythical Hydra. As days and nights passed, the holiday season dwindled, and Blake remained engrossed in his laboratory, on the cusp of unleashing a new era of magical discovery. Blake had to leave in secrecy, as per Dumbledore's request. He made a show of heading home, only to circle back and catch the train to Hogwarts. Despite the absence of others, the biological petri dish in his lab continued its work autonomously. Without the necessary activation from Blake, the creatures within remained dormant, unable to awaken on their own. Shortly after Blake stepped through the dimensional door to leave, the mass of unidentified tissue in the petri dish began to quiver ominously. Upon arriving at King's Cross Station, Blake was immediately confronted by a man. Hello, Mr. Worley, Blake greeted, managing a strained smile despite the unease he felt. Mr. Worley's expression was grim, causing Blake to fear the worst, that Mr. Worley had come to confront him over some grievance. Suddenly, Mr. Worley grasped Blake's right hand firmly. Well, Blake began, puzzled by Mr. Worley's unexpectedly enthusiastic handshake. This, Mr. Worley? What's going on? Oh, no, it's nothing. I was just utterly astonished by the magic of your unique sunflowers. You're truly remarkable, Mr. Worley exclaimed, his face alight with excitement. Is it really just about expressing your admiration? Blake asked, his suspicion evident. Absolutely, Mr. Worley assured him with a grave tone. Yet, Blake couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Mr. Worley's actions. Deciding to probe deeper, he discreetly employed his advanced legilimency skills. The thoughts he uncovered were a mix of resignation and disbelief. Do I, the head of the Worley family, really have to be coerced by my own daughter into apologizing to a young boy? And do I have to admit it to him? Oh, but since that hairy boy is you, I suppose it's acceptable. Blake was rendered speechless by Mr. Worley's internal monologue, filled with a mixture of sorrow and reluctant acceptance. The encounter at King's Cross Station had taken an unexpected turn, revealing the complexities of adult pride and the unexpected impact of his magical creations on the lives of others. Chapter 273, Misunderstandings and Apologies. Mr. Worley found himself in a predicament he had never anticipated. Previously, he couldn't understand why, after merely glaring at Blake, his daughter Cassandra suddenly became distant towards him. Moreover, his wife's reaction to the peculiar sunflower Cassandra brought home, followed by secretive conversations, only added to his confusion. During Cassandra's 3-day vacation at home, Mr. Worley felt an inexplicable tension within his own household. Gradually, through snippets of conversations with his wife, Mr. Worley pieced together the situation. It all began when he unintentionally intimidated Blake with a glare, just as Cassandra was about to invite Blake over. This reaction had not only upset his daughter, but also made his wife feel guilty for potentially ruining Cassandra's chance with a young man of considerable talent and even better background than their own. Blake, known for his exceptional skills in herbal medicine and the creation of a new magical plant with immense potential, had caught the interest of Cassandra. Yet, Mr. Worley's glare had inadvertently driven him away at a crucial moment. Learning that Blake nearly left for another girl because of this incident, Mrs. Worley was adamant that they couldn't let a misunderstanding drive a wedge between Blake and their family. Realizing his mistake, Mr. Worley knew he had to make amends. He decided to apologize to Blake, hoping to mend the situation without further embarrassment. However, Blake, having already understood the entire situation through legilimency, couldn't help but smirk at Mr. Worley's dilemma. When confronted, Blake feigned sadness, claiming he understood Mr. Worley's concerns and would distance himself from Cassandra, believing himself unworthy of her company. He even offered his technological investments as parting gifts. Before Mr. Worley could clarify his intentions, Blake swiftly departed, leaving him flustered and alone. In a moment of realization, Mr. Worley understood the gravity of his mistake. If Blake truly distanced himself from Cassandra and severed ties with the Worley family, Mr. Worley himself would be the one to blame. Desperate to rectify the situation, he chased after Blake, lamenting the misunderstanding. Mr. Worley's pursuit was not just about correcting a misunderstanding. It was about overcoming the protective instincts of a father. He realized that his initial annoyance with Blake was a natural reaction to seeing his daughter grow up and form connections outside the family. However, he also recognized the need to adapt and support Cassandra's choices. As Mr. Worley chased after Blake, calling out for him to stop, he hoped to convey his true intentions and apologize for the misunderstanding. He realized that his actions, though stemming from a place of concern, had been misinterpreted, leading to an unnecessary rift. Now, he was determined to set things right, not just for his daughter's happiness, but for the harmony of their family. After a prolonged and futile chase, Mr. Worley found himself gasping for breath, despairing at his inability to catch up. Not every wizard is blessed with physical prowess, and Blake, it seemed, was among those who were. His figure quickly vanished into the crowd, leaving Mr. Worley to lament his failure. "You little rascal, why must you run so swiftly? Listen to me, I'm seething with anger." Mr. Worley panted, his voice tinged with frustration. "Did you do this deliberately?" he called out, but to no avail. Exhausted, he could only watch as Blake disappeared from sight. Meanwhile, Blake, having put a considerable distance between himself and Mr. Worley, took a moment to tidy his disheveled hair before leisurely settling down at a roadside dessert shop. He ordered a strawberry sundae, a small reward for the chaos he had inadvertently caused. Ahem, it's not that I'm heartless. How could I possibly ignore such an opportunity to gain treasure? Blake mused to himself, enjoying his dessert. This is all just a big misunderstanding. I'm sure once everything is explained, Mr. Worley won't hold a grudge. After all, we're practically family. And a little deception among family members is normal, right? Unbeknownst to Blake, Cassandra and Mrs. Worley were observing the scene from a distance. They hadn't intended for Mr. Worley to chase Blake down. They simply hoped Mr. Worley would show some kindness towards the young herbalist prodigy. After all, Blake had contributed significantly to the Worley family business, and it would be unwise to alienate him over a misunderstanding. As Mr. Worley approached Blake, the initial interaction seemed promising. However, the situation quickly deteriorated. The handshake between them was followed by a few whispered words from Mr. Worley, which caused Blake's expression to shift dramatically, from shock to realization, then to sadness, and finally resignation. "What did Dad say to Blake? Why does he look so upset?" Cassandra whispered, concern evident in her voice. Mrs. Worley's response was uncertain, her voice fading as she spoke. If Mr. Worley hadn't said anything too harsh, why would Blake react so strongly? The situation escalated when Blake suddenly turned and ran, prompting Mr. Worley to give chase once more, this time with a determination that suggested he might not stop until he had caught up. "This is terrible. This could seriously offend him," Mrs. Worley murmured, watching the scene unfold with a sense of dread. "Dad, how could he?" Cassandra couldn't hide her disbelief. Blake had not only saved her life, but had also been a benefactor to their family. The thought of her father acting so aggressively towards him was unfathomable. As Mr. Worley disappeared into the crowd in pursuit of Blake, he was oblivious to the shocked and disappointed expressions of his wife and daughter. All he could think about was catching Blake, unaware of the emotional turmoil he had caused. "Little rascal, why run? Can't you just listen to what I have to say? You're going to be the death of me." Mr. Worley's voice trailed off into the distance, filled with a mix of frustration and desperation. "Detected that the target's treasure chest drops today have reached the upper limit," announced a voice. "Ding! This target will not drop a treasure chest again today. Blake set down his cup and stood up, leaving the dessert shop behind. Really, you must believe me. All I did was shake his hand and compliment his sunflower. Mr. Worley's voice trailed off as he tried to explain himself, but it was clear that his audience was skeptical. Two women, one older and one younger, fixed him with their large emerald green eyes, clearly doubting his story. Putting himself in their shoes, Mr. Worley realized he wouldn't believe his own explanation either. But I truly am innocent, he lamented. The sound of the train whistle indicated that the Hogwarts Express was ready to depart. Cassandra, in a panic, reported, "Blake isn't in the car. I don't know where he is." "Cassandra, calm down," Mrs. Worley said firmly, shooting a glare at Mr. Worley, who looked pale and distressed. "Blake will be all right. I'll write to Professor Dumbledore to clear up this misunderstanding. The train is about to leave, dear. You should board now. I promise we'll find Blake." As the train pulled away from platform 9 3/4, Mrs. Worley watched until it disappeared around a bend. She then turned to Mr. Worley. Everything I said is true. You have to believe me," he whispered, a mix of desperation and hope in his voice. "Okay, I know you're not lying," Mrs. Worley replied with a gentle smile. You believe me? But earlier you—" Mr. Worley was overwhelmed with relief. "And why did you treat that child so poorly?" she asked. "It was the child's way of getting back at you," she revealed. You mean he deliberately tricked me?" Mr. Worley was astounded. "What else?" Mrs. Worley said, her emerald green eyes sparkling with insight. Next time I see him, I'll make him regret it," Mr. Worley fumed, the realization hitting him hard. "Alas, don't you see? Blake tricked you today as a form of revenge," Mrs. Worley explained. "Think about it. After today, Cassandra will doubt any negative comments you make about Blake. Furthermore, she'll prevent you from doing anything to harm him. From now on, you won't even be able to scold him." Mr. Worley stared at his wife in shock, finally understanding the depth of Blake's cunning. What a sly boy. While deceiving me and seeking revenge, he also convinced Cassandra that I'm biased against him. I can't say anything bad about him in the future. Mr. Worley grumbled, realizing the predicament he was in. When I see him again, not only can I not be angry, but I'll have to treat him kindly. The thought of his efforts over the years being undone by someone he considered unworthy made Mr. Worley's blood boil. To think I have to praise the very person who's caused me so much trouble. Mr. Worley felt his blood pressure rising, a testament to the day's unexpected and frustrating turn of events. Chapter 274. Cassandra, you misunderstood. In fact, my father has facial paralysis. Ding! Anxiety and worry detected. Ding! Congratulations to the host for receiving a silver treasure chest. Huh? Blake paused in a secluded alley, about to use the dimension gate to board the bus directly. His actions halted abruptly as he noticed a significant decrease in the expected arrival of treasure chests. Could it be that I've been discovered? The missing treasure chests likely belonged to Mrs. Worley. Initially, a few were granted, but then the expected influx ceased. This indicated Mrs. Worley had caught on to his intentions. As for Mr. Worley, he had already maxed out his contributions. Most of the current treasure chests were courtesy of Cassandra. That makes sense. No wonder Cassandra is so astute. She must have inherited it from her mother. At that moment, Mr. Worley, who had just exited the station, sneezed loudly. Could it be that the little rascal took advantage of me, and now he's cursing me behind my back? Meanwhile, Hermione was perplexed. Despite searching numerous carriages, she couldn't find Blake. She wondered if he had gone to school on his own, a possibility that wasn't entirely far-fetched. Suddenly, she felt a light tap on her shoulder and turned to see Blake smiling at her. "I thought you had gone ahead to school," she said, relieved to see him. "Why would we rush to school? It's empty and dull there. It's much more enjoyable to travel together and chat," Blake replied, opening the door to an adjacent carriage, which was surprisingly empty. "How do you always find empty carriages?" Hermione asked, astonished. She had been on the bus for a while and found all other carriages occupied. "Just a bit of harmless magic," Blake said nonchalantly. After entering the carriage, Hermione realized it was the same one they had taken when they left Hogwarts 3 days ago. "You hid an entire carriage? What if you were caught?" But the school rules don't say anything about hiding carriages, Blake countered with a shrug. Besides, there are plenty of carriages. Missing one won't make a difference. Hermione wondered why the carriages, usually full, were now available. The Nurmengard Academy of Magic had taken responsibility for the incident. As Hermione settled in and stowed her school bag, she noticed a strawberry sundae in front of her. "I passed a dessert shop this morning and thought of you," Blake said. Despite the chilly weather, the carriage was as warm as spring, thanks to the sunflowers Blake had placed on the table, making the ice cream an appealing treat. Hermione took small bites of her sundae, stealing glances at Blake. Have you visited anyone in the past few days?" she probed, curious if Blake had been to Cassandra's house or perhaps somewhere else, like Ginny's. "Not really. I've been occupied with some experiments," Blake replied, evading the question. "Really? By the way, I saw Cassandra looking for you earlier." "Let's not talk about that," Blake said, knowing he had to maintain his facade. He had no intention of revealing the truth to Hermione. "Mr. Worley seems to have some misconceptions about me," he continued. "So, I guess I'll have to keep my distance from Cassandra." Hermione looked at him skeptically. It was unlike Blake to talk about distancing himself from someone, especially Cassandra. She found it hard to believe. The compartment door clicked slightly, signaling the beginning of their journey and the unfolding of more mysteries. The door suddenly swung open. "Blake, I finally found you!" Cassandra exclaimed as she walked in, her complexion ghostly pale. "Don't pay any attention to my father's absurd claims. I'm capable of making my own decisions," she declared, her voice laced with determination. "He has no right to meddle in my personal freedom. So, please, don't listen to him." Cassandra had stumbled upon this carriage by chance, overhearing Blake's intention to distance himself from her. The revelation had left her feeling deeply wronged. It seemed to her that Blake, without considering her feelings, had resolved to end their relationship. Blake's actions momentarily halted. He then realized that Hermione had left the door ajar upon entering. An open door meant that Blake's concealment charm would fail, which explained why Cassandra had been able to spot the hidden carriage as she passed by. "Ahem, Cassandra, please take a seat," Blake suggested, regaining his composure. Cassandra bit her lip and complied, sitting across from Blake. Her feelings were a complex mix of indignation and guilt. After all, Blake had been nothing but kind to her, even going as far as to assist the Woolley family significantly, offering them newly developed plants and seeds without a second thought. Yet her father's response to Blake was anything but grateful. Empathizing with Blake, she could understand his reaction. Anyone would feel disheartened after being met with coldness and hostility despite their generous efforts. It seemed Blake wanted to sever ties with the Woolley family as a protective measure. "Blake, this is all a big misunderstanding. My father didn't mean what you think," Cassandra tried to explain, though she herself was in the dark about the true nature of the situation. She pinned her hopes on her mother, believing she could sway her father's stubborn views. Little did she know, her father's animosity towards Blake was based on a deception that had caused his blood pressure to skyrocket. "Really? Am I just overthinking things?" Blake questioned, his tone softening. I sometimes struggle with self-esteem, so I might be overly sensitive," Cassandra admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I never wanted our relationship to end." Hermione, who had been quietly enjoying her strawberry sundae, couldn't help but smirk at the exchange. Low self-esteem? More like a feeling of inferiority, she thought, amused by Blake's dramatics. "No, it's not you. It's actually what your father implied," Blake said, his expression turning grave once more. Cassandra frantically shook her head. No, it's just, he has a bit of a stern face. He didn't mean to single anyone out." Blake coughed violently, nearly choking. "Facial paralysis? Really?" he managed to say between coughs, incredulous at Cassandra's desperate attempt to justify her father's behavior. As the conversation unfolded, Blake's embarrassment became palpable. He was a master at manipulating situations to his advantage, and even Mr. Worley had been none the wiser. Cassandra, naive and unaware of the manipulation, believed her father genuinely disliked Blake, which only added to her guilt. "Dad is too biased against Blake. I'll make sure he accepts him," Cassandra resolved, unaware that Blake was orchestrating the entire scenario. As night descended, the train reached its destination, marking the end of their unexpected holiday. Upon disembarking, Blake was greeted by Hagrid's enthusiastic embrace, which nearly crushed him. Ahem. Hagrid, a little gentler, please, Blake gasped. Oh, sorry. Blake, are you all right? Hagrid asked, concern evident in his voice. It's nothing serious, but why such a warm welcome all of a sudden? Blake inquired, puzzled by Hagrid's exuberant greeting. Hagrid knelt down, his eyes brimming with warmth and sincerity, resembling dark beetles in the dim light. With tears in his eyes, Hagrid exclaimed, I know that. I know everything. Dumbledore told me it was because of you that I finally saw things clearly. It's really, I don't even know what to say. Thank you for everything you've done for me. As he spoke, Hagrid took out his large handkerchief and wiped away his tears. Suddenly, a system prompt chimed in Blake's mind. Ding! Gratitude detected, followed ding! Congratulations to the host for receiving a silver treasure chest. Another prompt quickly followed. Ding! A follower who is willing to follow the host has been detected. Will the host accept? Blake decided, not now. The system responded, ding! The inclusion of Rubus Hagrid has been put on hold for now. After addressing the system's notifications, Blake stood on tiptoe and gently patted the towering Hagrid on the shoulder. Okay, Hagrid, don't be like this, especially with people around. Blake chided him playfully. Come on, don't be so emotional. What I did was necessary. And hey, let's have tea together when I find some time. Blake mused on the situation. The Ministry of Magic was notorious for its sluggish efficiency, but even Dumbledore wasn't the quickest at times. However, Minister Fudge was still on good terms with Dumbledore and was more than willing to do him a favor, especially when it came to Hagrid. The evidence exonerating Hagrid was undeniable, and his rehabilitation was long overdue. Thus, Hagrid finally received the justice he deserved, leaving with immense gratitude. Cassandra and Hermione observed the exchange with astonishment. What did you do for that giant of a man? Cassandra asked, bewildered. He seems like he'd do anything for you now. Hermione, ever perceptive, eyed Blake with suspicion. Has what you've been busy with these past few days been about helping Hagrid? She inquired. Even though Hagrid was already your friend, he's never been as grateful as he is now. And to think all this happened during just 3 days of vacation. I refuse to believe you spent those days just reading at home, Hermione declared, her skepticism clear. Blake faced the two girls, their curious gazes fixed on him. With a mischievous smile, he teased, Do you really want to know? He paused for effect before playfully adding, I won't tell you. The system promptly announced, Ding! 2 angry emotions detected, followed by, Ding! Congratulations to the host for receiving 2 silver treasure chests. Chapter 275. Ah! Don't come over here. A tranquil Halloween had passed, and as time marched on, it reached the middle of November. It was Saturday, and spirits were high once again. This was because the new collegiate Quidditch season was kicking off this year. After a week filled with burdensome schoolwork, everyone was eager for a day of cheering and emotional release. Moreover, today marked the derby match between the rival teams of Gryffindor and Slytherin, the first game since Slytherin had upgraded their equipment. Given Slytherin's notorious reputation, both Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff were rooting for a Gryffindor victory. However, with Slytherin's new gear giving them a speed advantage, Gryffindor's chances of winning seemed slim. Slytherin's chasers, now faster, would likely score more easily. According to professional commentator Lee Jordan, the outcome might not hinge on the usual gameplay, but on whether Gryffindor could catch the golden snitch before Slytherin led by 150 points. Essentially, Gryffindor's victory rested on Harry Potter's shoulders. Beyond a 150-point lead, Gryffindor's chasers would struggle to outpace Slytherin. As 11 o'clock approached, everyone hurried to the Quidditch pitch, hoping to secure a good viewing spot. Hello, have you seen Blake? Hermione inquired, stopping a Hufflepuff girl. It was a strategic choice. Boys might not know Blake's whereabouts, but girls likely would. He's by the Gryffindor dressing room on the Quidditch pitch, the girl responded promptly. However, upon realizing Hermione was the one asking, her demeanor shifted. Granger, is it you? Aren't you Blake's friend? How do you not know where he is? She chided, then added with a hint of rivalry, If you're so negligent, I might just snatch him away from you. Hermione was left speechless, watching the girl walk away. She couldn't help but marvel at how many girls Blake had charmed. Given his impressive feats, it was no surprise he attracted so much attention. This realization led Hermione to question her own feelings for Blake, wondering if her lack of knowledge about his whereabouts indicated a deeper concern for things she couldn't have. Shaking off her thoughts, Hermione found Blake outside the Gryffindor team's locker room, casually sitting on the railing with sunglasses perched on his nose. Harry, donned in his red Gryffindor Quidditch jersey, stood before Blake, reaching out his hand. The surrounding crowd looked on in shock. "Harry, you're not having a good day today," Blake observed, examining Harry's hand and then his face. "What's wrong with me today?" Harry asked, puzzled and concerned. Blake sighed dramatically. "There are dark clouds overhead." Harry, growing anxious, pressed for details. "What does that mean?" "It means your aura is dark today, your luck is poor, and you might face a bloody disaster," Blake explained ominously. Harry's fear intensified. What does a bloody disaster entail?" Blake, feigning wisdom, responded, "At best, you'll barely survive. If I were you, I wouldn't play today." Harry was visibly shaken. "Is it really that serious?" Pointing to a line on Harry's palm, Blake added, "See, there's a break in your career line here. Do you know what that means?" Harry, now thoroughly alarmed, could only stammer, "What does it mean? Explain yourself. If you don't handle this properly, your entire career could be at stake. Whether it's as a Quidditch player or any other professional path, it could all come crashing down," Blake stated calmly. What does this mean?" Harry's voice quivered with uncertainty. "It's quite simple, really. If you don't manage this situation correctly, you could end up permanently injured," Blake explained, his tone unchanging. Harry felt as if he had been struck by lightning, his legs nearly giving way beneath him. "Out of my way!" Wood bellowed, storming out of the locker room to disperse the gathering crowd. His mind was in turmoil. On the eve of such an important game, here was the Quidditch captain from a rival house, seemingly casting a spell over his star player to prevent him from playing. What could possibly be the motive? And judging by Harry's reaction, he seemed to have taken Blake's words to heart. It wasn't surprising, given Blake's reputation for insight and the fact that Harry's every doubt seemed transparent to Blake's skilled use of legilimency. Moreover, Harry was already under immense pressure, especially after Wood's own declaration that the game must be won at all costs, even hinting at a fatal outcome for failure. As these thoughts swirled in his mind, Harry, still reeling from the conversation, allowed Wood to lead him back into the locker room, yet his gaze lingered on Blake. "Blake, Master, how can I overcome this?" Harry pleaded. "Harry, beware of Lockhart. If you see him, avoid him at all costs, even if it means crawling away. And if escape is impossible, use a stunning spell on him," Blake advised, just before he and Hermione were unceremoniously ejected from the vicinity. Hermione, landing in the stands with a thud, was utterly confused. "I've only just arrived and know nothing of this. Why am I being thrown out too?" "I'm afraid it can't be helped. You're my friend, and others will naturally assume you're on my side," Blake explained, casually cleaning his sunglasses. "Who says I'm on your side?" Hermione retorted, her cheeks flushed with indignation. "And what exactly are you up to?" she demanded. "Fortune-telling. I've developed a unique skill in reading faces and palms," Blake claimed, boasting shamelessly. In truth, his proficiency in legilimency rendered any need for psychological tricks obsolete. He could discern far more than mere surface thoughts, leaving those he read astounded by his accuracy. His recent activities were merely a guise to collect rewards under the pretense of fortune-telling. "Fortune-telling? But you're a wizard. How can you possibly believe in such things?" Hermione challenged, hurling her school bag at Blake in frustration. "Are you simply trying to deceive Harry so he won't play, ensuring Gryffindor's defeat?" she accused. "I saw everything. If Wood hadn't intervened, Harry might have fallen for your trick and ended up seriously hurt." Hermione continued, her tone accusatory. "It's not a deception. You'll see in time," Blake responded, touching his nose thoughtfully. "And why would I want Gryffindor to lose?" he mused aloud. Perhaps you're trying to curry favor with someone," Hermione speculated, turning away. "Someone?" Blake echoed, feigning innocence. "Ah, speaking of which, why haven't we seen Cassandra today?" Because this is the Gryffindor stand. Why would she, a member of our rival house, be here? Hermione retorted. And me? Blake pondered. You're from Hufflepuff, and Hufflepuff generally maintains good relations with Gryffindor, as well as with the other houses, Hermione explained, her tone softening slightly. So does that mean I could actually sneak into the Slytherin stands to watch the game? Maybe even with Cassandra? Blake mused, a mischievous glint in his eye. You, go ahead if you want. What does it matter to me? Why are you even asking me? Hermione snapped, turning her head away once more. Really? Can I actually go to Slytherin? Blake pressed, sensing her irritation. Fine, then I'll really go, he declared, feigning a dramatic exit. Get lost, Hermione exclaimed, her frustration evident. Ding, hostile emotion detected, a voice chimed in Blake's head. Ding, congratulations to the host for acquiring a silver treasure chest, the voice announced, marking another peculiar turn in their eventful day. The morning sun shone brightly over the Quidditch pitch, which was already bustling with excitement. The stands were filled to the brim, not just with Hogwarts students, but also with visitors from the nearby village of Hogsmeade. The open invitation to the public made the event even more thrilling, contributing to the packed stadium. The sharp whistle signaled the start of the game, and the players took to the sky with remarkable speed. Among the spectators, Blake, with a mischievous grin, borrowed Hermione's telescope without asking, eager to get a closer look at Harry. His suspicion was confirmed when he noticed a bludger, bewitched with an odd magic, aggressively targeting Harry. Blake surmised it was the work of house elf magic, though he humorously wondered why he bothered with the telescope when he possessed the Eye of Truth. Hermione, annoyed by Blake's antics, snatched the telescope back, scolding him for not having his own. Their playful banter was interrupted by the game's commentator, Lee Jordan, who exclaimed in shock as the bewitched bludger relentlessly pursued Harry. Despite Fred and George Weasley's efforts to protect their teammate, their distraction allowed Slytherin to score repeatedly, leading 60-0. The game was momentarily halted amid protests and calls for an investigation, which could potentially lead to Gryffindor forfeiting the match. However, Harry insisted on continuing, urging the Weasley twins to focus on the game rather than his safety. Blake, putting aside his quest for Hermione's telescope, used his Eye of Truth to locate the source of the enchanted bludger. Amidst the chaos, Harry, displaying remarkable skill and determination, caught the golden snitch, securing victory for Gryffindor. However, the triumph came at a cost, as Harry's arm was severely injured by the bludger. As Harry lay on the ground, cradling his broken arm and the golden snitch, he remembered Blake's cryptic warning about avoiding a certain disaster. The pain was excruciating, but Harry was more concerned about the possibility of permanent damage. He hoped Madame Pomfrey's expertise would be enough to heal him, puzzled by Blake's advice to steer clear of Professor Lockhart. Before Harry could delve deeper into his thoughts, he lost consciousness from the pain. Upon waking, he was greeted by the sight of Gilderoy Lockhart's dazzling smile, immediately recalling Blake's warning. Terrified at the prospect of Lockhart attempting to heal him, Harry protested vehemently, transforming into the roaring emperor in his desperation to avoid Lockhart's well-intentioned but potentially disastrous help. "Stay with me for the treatment," Lockhart urged, his voice a mix of comfort and command. "Lie down, Harry. It's just a simple spell. I've used it countless times." Despite Lockhart's reassurances, Harry was in agony and desperate to escape. "I'm going to the hospital wing." "I don't want you." "Ah! Why did I forget to bring my wand?" In his pain, Harry began to awkwardly crawl away, echoing Blake's earlier warning that he should keep his distance from Lockhart at all costs. But it was already too late. "Everyone, stand back," Lockhart announced, brandishing his wand with an air of misplaced confidence. Don't. Harry's pleas were cut short as a bizarre and intensely uncomfortable sensation surged from his shoulder down to his fingertips. It felt as though the very essence of his arm was being siphoned away. A collective gasp filled the room when they saw the result. Harry's arm had transformed into something resembling a thick, flesh-colored rubber glove. The bones in his arm had vanished entirely. Lockhart, visibly taken aback by the outcome, stared at Harry's limp arm. He prided himself on his spellcasting abilities, yet he had somehow managed to cast the bone-vanishing curse. The situation left him flustered and embarrassed. "Ah, well, these things do happen," Lockhart attempted to salvage the situation with a laugh. "But the important thing is that the bones can be regrown. Remember this lesson, everyone. Now, Harry, let's make our way to the hospital wing." As Harry looked down at his boneless arm, Blake's warning echoed ominously in his mind. A mishandled situation like this could not only ruin his Quidditch career, but potentially leave him permanently disabled. The realization of his current predicament filled him with a deep sense of regret for not bringing his wand. Had he done so, he would be incapacitated Lockhart without a second thought to prevent this disaster. Glancing at his deformed arm, Harry thought despairingly of his future and the potential loss of his abilities. "Ah! My ability to play Quidditch!" The thought was too much for him, and overwhelmed by the shock and pain, Harry's eyes rolled back as he fainted, the word pill escaping his lips as he lost consciousness. Chapter 276. The Incident on the Quidditch Pitch. On the Quidditch pitch, the hero of the day for Gryffindor, Harry Potter, was being rushed to the school hospital by his housemates. His arm hung limply, resembling a deflated rubber glove, causing onlookers to gasp in horror and instinctively distance themselves from the grinning Professor Lockhart. With a smile, he had managed to vanish all the bones in Harry's arm. Elsewhere, Draco Malfoy was receiving a stern lecture from his team captain, his face pale. The golden snitch had been mere centimeters from his grasp. If only he had reached out his hand, the glory would have been his. Now it was Harry who received the cheers, despite his injury. "Damn it! Scarhead!" Malfoy cursed under his breath. In a secluded corner of the pitch, a small figure was frantically banging his head against the wall. Dobby didn't want anything bad to happen to Harry Potter," he muttered guiltily. "Dobby wishes Harry Potter would leave Hogwarts and go home. Dobby would rather punish himself than see harm come to him." Suddenly, a carefree voice interrupted Dobby's self-flagellation. "Hey, are you busy? Can you finish your work first?" Startled, Dobby attempted to apparate away, only to realize his magic had failed him. "Oh, I see this improved anti-apparition spell works on house elves after all," Blake remarked, stepping out from the shadows and observing Dobby's panicked expression. Dobby screamed and attempted to flee, but in the next instant, he felt himself being lifted by the back of his neck, his feet dangling helplessly in the air. Blake, possessing supernatural strength, held Dobby with ease, rendering the elf's struggles futile. "Ding! Extreme panic detected," a voice announced, followed by, "Congratulations to the host for getting a golden treasure chest." Blake was pleasantly surprised, then examined Dobby with the eye of truth. Golden quality? It's no wonder Dobby has been seeking freedom for years. He truly is exceptional among house elves. "Sir, please, let Dobby go. Poor Dobby was just passing through," Dobby pleaded, lying, as Blake was not his master. "Passing by? I saw you tampering with that bludger. You wanted to kill Harry Potter," Blake accused. "No," Dobby protested vehemently. "Dobby doesn't want to kill Harry Potter. Dobby only wanted to save him, to make him leave Hogwarts. There's great danger here this year. The Chamber of Secrets." Realizing he had said too much, Dobby began to punish himself again. "Bad Dobby. Bad Dobby. That's enough. Now, I'm taking you to see Professor Dumbledore. Since you're aware of the truth, it's time we uncovered the whole story," Blake said, his grin more genuine and charming than Lockhart's ever could be. Dobby's cries of despair were met with another notification of extreme panic, much to Blake's satisfaction. "I feel comfortable now." Meanwhile, Dumbledore, having finished his work, stood up to make himself a cup of hot cocoa, a task he performed himself in the absence of house elves. Just then, he noticed a small circle of sparks in the sky. "Ahem, Professor, are you free now? Is it convenient for me to come over?" Blake's voice emanated from the circle of sparks. "Come in," Dumbledore responded, setting his empty cup aside. The circle of sparks expanded, and Blake stepped through, holding a struggling Dobby in his grasp. "Isn't this a house elf from Hogwarts?" Dumbledore inquired, peering down at Dobby. "Obviously not. I know every house elf in Hogwarts," Dumbledore observed, his gaze shifting from Dobby to Blake, signaling the beginning of an important conversation. Dumbledore peered at Blake over his half-moon glasses. "There are hundreds of house elves at Hogwarts." "Actually, 135, Professor." Blake corrected firmly, his exceptional memory allowing him to recall the exact number of house elves. Dumbledore was momentarily at a loss for words. Okay, what's going on? In today's Quidditch match, he tampered with the bludger, resulting in Harry breaking his ablesa RM. Harry is injured? Dumbledore's frown deepened. Given Harry Potter's unique status, his injuries were always a cause for concern. Yes, he's currently in the school hospital. With a broken arm, he shouldn't need to be hospitalized, should he? Dumbledore eyed Blake with suspicion. In the wizarding world, a broken arm could be easily mended with a spell. Madame Pomfrey was adept at reattaching bones in mere seconds, eliminating the need for hospitalization. Well, Lockhart attempted to heal him, and then... Harry's arm was completely boneless, Blake explained, noticing Dumbledore's beard begin to tremble, this time due to the situation at hand. Dumbledore's gaze shifted to Dobby, who, under the scrutiny of the century's greatest wizard, had ceased his struggles. When Blake set him down, Dobby couldn't even stand properly and collapsed to the ground. I find it hard to believe a house elf would intentionally harm a wizard. Can you explain your actions? Dumbledore asked gently. Dobby, sitting on the ground and sobbing, replied, Dobby wanted to save Harry Potter's life. It's better for him to be sent home with serious injuries than to stay here. Dobby only wanted Harry Potter to be slightly injured and sent home. Something terrible is going to happen at Hogwarts soon, if it hasn't already. Dobby can't let Harry Potter stay here because history is about to repeat itself. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened again. Dobby's voice trailed off, his fear palpable. Suddenly his eyes locked onto a cup on Dumbledore's table. With a cry, he lunged for it, intending to hit himself on the head. However, Blake, anticipating this, lifted him up again. No, let Dobby go. Dobby must punish himself. Dobby wailed. You need to calm down first, Dumbledore said softly, tapping Dobby's forehead lightly. Dobby's struggles ceased, and his large, ping-pong ball-sized eyes began to close. Moments later, he was asleep. Dumbledore turned to Blake. What do you think? Blake shrugged. Clearly, we've kept the news about the Chamber of Secrets too well hidden. This poor house elf didn't know we've already addressed the issue, so he thought Harry was still in danger. His intentions were good, but his methods were rather extreme. If he continued trying to save Harry in this manner, Harry might have been sent away prematurely. Dumbledore nodded in agreement. Yes, and since we've kept the Chamber of Secrets under wraps, it would be nearly impossible for outsiders to know about it unless the information was leaked. Blake continued. It's evident that this house elf, Dobby, knew about the Chamber of Secrets before any of us at Hogwarts did. Remember when Harry started school and the passage was blocked? He had to fly to school in Mr. Weasley's car. I suspect Dobby was behind that as well, given that no one else had a motive. So, if he knew about this before us, it confirms one thing. Whoever Dobby works for is behind the Chamber of Secrets incident, Blake concluded. Dumbledore clapped his hands softly, impressed. Astute observation, Blake. I had the same thought. In other words, the diary found in Ginny's textbook likely came from Dobby's master. Dobby's personal admiration for Harry allowed him to overcome his fear of his master temporarily, trying every means to keep Harry out of harm's way. This explains why he resorted to self-punishment after divulging crucial information. Chapter Revision: The Master Behind the Curtain. The crux of the matter now lay in a single question. Who was Dobby's master? The room was thick with anticipation as Blake spoke up, his voice cutting through the silence. There's no need to speculate. It's Lucius Malfoy. Dumbledore, ever the picture of calm, raised an eyebrow and inquired with a gentle smile. And why do you believe that? Blake leaned forward, his argument ready. Ginny mentioned that Mr. Weasley and Lucius Malfoy had a confrontation at Flourish and Blots. During the scuffle, Ginny's books were scattered everywhere. If someone wanted to discreetly slip an ordinary-looking diary among Ginny's textbooks, that chaos provided the perfect opportunity. Furthermore, house elves like Dobby are typically found in the service of pure-blood families, such as the Malfoys. Most compelling, however, is the fact that Lucius Malfoy would have access to Tom Riddle's belongings. It's well known that he once had Tom's trust. Dumbledore nodded, his expression grave. Indeed, Lucius went to great lengths to distance himself from past crimes. So, can we take action against him? Blake asked, hope flickering in his eyes. Dumbledore sighed, the weight of the situation heavy on his shoulders. Unfortunately, we lack direct evidence of Malfoy's involvement. A house elf cannot be expected to testify against his master. Blake's frustration was palpable. So we're aware that he nearly turned Hogwarts into a bloodbath, yet our hands are tied? This is absurd. In the wizarding world, shouldn't a simple dose of Veritaserum solve such disputes? He shook his head in disbelief. Clearly, the Ministry lacks the courage to confront Lucius Malfoy with such measures. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief. While we may not be able to convict him, there are ways to ensure he faces consequences. Blake's interest was piqued, recognizing the mischievous glint in Dumbledore's gaze. Arthur Weasley frequently participates in raids to confiscate cursed items, doesn't he? With just a tip-off, he could lead a team to Malfoy's doorstep. Of course, we wouldn't expect to find blatantly cursed Muggle artifacts, but I'm sure there are other items Lucius would prefer remain hidden. Blake's applause filled the room. Keeping the Chamber of Secrets incident under wraps meant Arthur Weasley had yet to express his full outrage. This plan would not only allow Mr. Weasley to channel his anger, but also make Lucius Malfoy pay a price for his deeds. It was an elegant solution. Dumbledore then turned his attention to Dobby, his gaze softening. Let him return home, but inform him that the Chamber's mystery has been resolved. It's crucial to keep this matter confidential, but if we don't reassure Dobby, he might continue his misguided attempts to save Harry. Blake nodded in agreement. Understood. I'll ensure Dobby receives the message. With that, Blake stepped through a dimensional door that had opened in the office, vanishing from sight. Dumbledore, left alone, reached for his cup, expecting to find it empty. To his surprise, it now contained steaming hot chocolate. A smile crept across his face as he picked up the cup. Ah, that boy! Always so thoughtful, Dumbledore chuckled, savoring the warmth of the unexpected gift. Chapter 277. Blake, Lockhart? I'm afraid I might accidentally beat him to death. When Dobby awoke, the first thing he saw was the expansive blue sky above him, and he found himself lying on a patch of grass. Shaking his head to clear it, he sat up. Not far from him, a large blue bird observed him curiously, tilting its head. Surveying his surroundings, Dobby realized he was in the middle of a vast grassland under a clear blue sky. However, an out-of-place door stood alone nearby, its presence stark against the natural landscape. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and a young wizard stepped through. Ah, it's you! Dobby trembled at the sight of Blake, finding this young wizard far more intimidating than even Professor Dumbledore. Awake, are you? Blake inquired. Dobby? Is Dobby going to die? Dobby asked, shrinking back in fear. Die? No. Why would we kill you? Blake replied, conjuring 2 extra stools and placing one on the grass. Please, take a seat, Dobby. I believe we can have a conversation. Oh, Dobby, please sit down. Dobby, no longer as frightened, hesitantly climbed onto the stool. In his worldview, anyone who showed such courtesy to a house elf couldn't be evil. Would you like some tea? Blake offered. Dobby? Dobby, no. Before Dobby could finish his refusal, he found himself holding a cup of steaming black tea. Dobby. Oh, wow! Overwhelmed, Dobby burst into tears, his hands shaking so much that he nearly dropped the cup. Why are you crying? How can we discuss anything like this? Blake said, somewhat exasperated. He had secretly probed Dobby's soul while the elf was unconscious, not to invade his memories, but to understand whether house elves were enslaved through magic or indoctrination. This exploration revealed that their servitude was due to deep-seated brainwashing without any magical enforcement. This realization explained why there were outliers like Dobby who began to question their ingrained beliefs. After calming down, Blake shared, I wanted to inform you that we're aware of the Chamber of Secrets issue and have resolved it. It wasn't publicized for certain reasons. We took advantage of the Halloween break to eliminate the monster within the chamber. The basilisk is dead, so there's no need for you to protect Harry Potter any longer. His life is no longer in danger. Dobby, shocked at first, soon cried tears of joy. Harry Potter can stay at Hogwarts without facing danger. That's wonderful. Thank you, great sir. It must have been you and Professor Dumbledore who uncovered and addressed the threat, right? After some time, Blake managed to soothe Dobby's emotions. Now that you're informed, you can return. Can Dobby go back? Dobby's response lacked enthusiasm. What, don't you wish to return to your master? Blake inquired. Dobby! Dobby! Ah! Bad Dobby! Dobby began to chastise himself, but Blake quickly intervened to prevent him from self-harm. You are a unique elf, Dobby, Blake said, handing him a small bottle. If one day you decide to pursue the desires of your heart, drink this, but be aware, if you do, there's a 50% chance. You will either die or you will get what you desire, he said, his voice carrying a weight that made the room seem colder. The choice is yours, based on your own conscience. Dobby looked at Blake, his eyes wide with surprise. Blake returned the gaze calmly, his blue eyes piercing, as if he could see right into Dobby's soul. After a moment of silence, Dobby whispered, Before I leave, may I visit Harry Potter alone? The next morning, Harry left the school hospital. His arm bones were grown. They were still stiff, but infinitely better than the unsettling floppiness he'd endured, which had made him fear for the loss of his arm. He mentally thanked Madame Pomfrey and the Bone Spirit for their help. As for Lockhart, Harry now harbored a strong desire to knock his teeth out. The house elf named Dobby had confessed to being behind the troubles, initially angering Harry. However, he realized Dobby's intentions were good, unlike Lockhart, who sought fame without regard for his competence. With these thoughts, Harry headed to the dining hall for breakfast. Scarhead, you got lucky this time, Malfoy sneered from a distance. It's not luck, it's someone's stupidity, Harry retorted, raising his still stiff arm to his ear, mocking Malfoy. Oh, if I recall, the golden snitch was in your possession at that time? Malfoy's face drained of color at Harry's pointed reminder of his recent failures. Scarhead, I challenge you to a duel, Malfoy declared, his emotions boiling over. A duel? Without your cronies to back you up? Harry quipped, ready to confront him. Their standoff was interrupted by a familiar, unwelcome voice. Did someone say duel? There's no one better at dueling than me, Lockhart announced, inserting himself into the situation. Harry didn't need to see him to recognize the voice. With Lockhart's presence, the duel was effectively quashed, given his status as a professor. Oh, Harry, how's your arm? No need to thank me. I merely said it so you could recover swiftly. Lockhart boasted, oblivious to Harry's irritation. Harry nearly lost his temper, wanting nothing more than to escape Lockhart's self-praise. As he turned to leave, Lockhart's voice followed him, offering dueling lessons. Harry paused, an idea forming. Perhaps Lockhart could be put in his place. Professor Lockhart, since you're so adept at dueling, perhaps you should lead the dueling club, Harry suggested, knowing full well the previous year's instructor had been less than stellar. Lockhart's face lit up at the suggestion. Ah, since you insist, I'll join the dueling club as its instructor, he declared, thrilled at the opportunity to showcase his supposed skills. Harry couldn't help but smirk at the thought of Lockhart attempting to impress Blake, the dueling club's president. The encounter between the two promised to be interesting. Malfoy, still fuming, warned Harry of his perceived discomfort. Harry merely laughed, unbothered by Malfoy's glare, already anticipating the drama that would unfold with Lockhart's involvement in the dueling club. If you're not convinced, then meet me at the 910 Duel Club, and I'll show you how to behave properly. Who's scared of who? It was Friday night, the designated day for the Duel Club's activities. Typically, Blake, the club's president, along with the vice president, Penello, would demonstrate various dueling spells before allowing the members to practice on their own. However, today was different. All members of the Duel Club had received a notification to gather in the activity room at 6 o'clock that evening for a special session with a new instructor. The news had sparked excitement among the members, as the presence of an instructor promised to make the evening's class far more engaging. Blake, however, was not sharing in the general enthusiasm. She was in a foul mood. Penello, didn't we agree to invite Professor Flitwick to be our advisor? She asked. After all, he was a dueling champion in his youth. There's no one more qualified. Penello sighed as she placed a stack of forms back on the table. I know, but Professor Flitwick is currently unavailable. He's wrapping up some work and plans to return as a tutor later. And then, out of nowhere, Professor Lockhart offered to step in. Blake frowned. Why should he get to be the advisor just because he wants to? Does Professor Dumbledore know about this? Of course he does. Professor Dumbledore agreed to it, Penello replied. Blake scratched his head in frustration. He couldn't help but think that Dumbledore was losing his touch. It seemed inconceivable to Blake that Dumbledore, despite his age, would be unaware of Lockhart's dubious reputation. Yet, not only had Dumbledore appointed Lockhart as the defense against the dark arts professor, but he had also approved him as the duel club's instructor. Blake couldn't fathom Dumbledore's intentions. Okay, Blake, let's not dwell on this for now. You should start getting ready, Penello suggested. Ready for what? Blake asked, puzzled. As the president of the duel club, you're expected to have a demonstration duel with the instructor during tonight's session, Penello explained. Upon hearing this, Blake's expression turned blank. Well then, I do need to prepare. Otherwise, I might accidentally defeat him too severely. The conversation highlighted the tension and skepticism surrounding the new instructor's appointment, setting the stage for an intriguing duel club session. Chapter 278, Lockhart, thanks to Harry's kind invitation. Harry, it's over. The afternoon stretched ahead, and Blake, foregoing any breaks or meals, donned his alchemy glasses and delved into his work. It wasn't until 5:40 p.m., with the evening drawing near, that he finally paused. Penello, knowing his tendency to skip meals when engrossed in his projects, brought him several meat pies and a bottle of pumpkin juice. Blake, setting aside the rough-looking rings he had been working on, sighed. Given the time constraints, this is the best I could manage. Wash your hands first, Penello insisted, eyeing the black stains marring Blake's hands from his recent refining work. With a resigned nod, Blake conjured a basin of water with a spell and washed his hands clean. What have you been working on all afternoon? Penello inquired, her curiosity piqued by the rings on Blake's table. Just some gadgets to control magic, Blake replied nonchalantly, taking a hearty bite of his pie. You have no idea how challenging it is for me every time we train together. He explained how, with age, his already abnormal magical power continued to grow, making it increasingly difficult to control. This was a natural progression, akin to how physical strength increases with age, but for someone with Blake's extraordinary capabilities, the escalation was alarmingly significant. Fearing the potential harm he could cause during duels, especially with a session scheduled with Lockhart that evening, Blake had crafted several magic control rings. These devices could suppress his magic, allowing him to unleash his full power when necessary and keep it in check otherwise. It was a temporary solution, akin to fixing a leaky pipe, but it promised to alleviate some of Blake's concerns. I see. So training with me has been difficult for you, Penello remarked, her expression unreadable. Blake's heart raced. Senior, that's not what I meant. I know, you don't need to explain, Penello replied calmly, though Blake couldn't help but feel a chill. I'm kidding, she added with a smirk, lightening the mood. But really, it must be tough training with me, right? Curious about the ring's efficacy, Penello slipped one onto her finger. Is this really as powerful as you say? It can suppress your magic. Try it and see, Blake encouraged. Penello nodded, aimed her wand at a chair, and attempted a levitation spell, but to her astonishment, the chair remained unmoved. After several more unsuccessful attempts with spells she was proficient in, she removed the ring, and her magic flowed smoothly once again. Blake, it feels terrible to be powerless, Penello admitted, shaken by the experience. Blake reassured her with a smile. Senior, it's okay. Even if you were to become powerless, I could still help you. With a playful roll of her eyes, Penello conceded. Just bragging. Okay, it's time for me to get ready. Professor Lockhart will be arriving soon. As they prepared for the evening's training session, the atmosphere was a mix of anticipation and trepidation, with Blake's new invention promising to add an unexpected element to the proceedings. Lockhart's mention caused Blake's expression to sour. Why should you care about him? Just come if you want to. It's not like you don't know the way. Please, show some maturity. Regardless of your feelings towards me, I am still a professor. How can you come unprepared? Blake slouched further into his chair, his frustration evident. Senior sister, are you serious right now? You're asking a 12-year-old to act mature. You always make people forget you're just a child, Penello retorted, her curiosity shifting. By the way, have you tried on those rings of yours? She was intrigued by a ring that could potentially turn a wizard into a squib. After Blake puts it on, she wondered, how could he still perform magic? Blake calmly picked up a ring and slid it onto his finger. He paused, feeling its effects carefully. Under Penello's astonished gaze, he proceeded to put on a second ring, then a third, until he had 5 rings adorning his hand. Only then did he nod in satisfaction. "It's fine," he declared. Can you still perform magic now?" Penello asked, shock evident in her voice. 1 ring was enough to render her powerless, yet Blake had managed to wear 5. Blake took out his wand, examining it briefly before putting it away. After rummaging in his pocket, he found an old, second-hand wand he had bought from a shop in Diagon Alley for experimental purposes. In the past, using this wand was practically a death wish, as it was prone to exploding. But now, Blake pointed the wand at the chair Penello had previously enchanted with a levitation spell. Without uttering a single incantation, the chair began to levitate slowly. Penello watched in disbelief. You can still use magic with 5 rings on? And cast a spell silently?" Blake nodded. "It's quite manageable, but casting spells without a wand might prove more challenging." Penello was momentarily lost for words, but she eventually grasped the gravity of Blake's statement. It wasn't just challenging for him to cast spells without a wand or incantations. It was a testament to his suppressed magical power still being formidable enough to perform magic. Indeed, some people were just naturally infuriating. "Ding! Shock detected! Ding! Congratulations to the host for receiving a silver treasure chest." Lockhart's arrival was swift, almost as if delaying any longer would diminish his chance to stand out in the duel club. Blake noticed the mixed reactions among the students at the announcement of their advisor. Some appeared disheartened, while others were visibly excited. It was clear that Lockhart's reputation had sown confusion among many. However, Blake found something particularly interesting. Harry Potter, of all people, seemed as thrilled as the girl next to him at the sight of Lockhart. Considering Harry's recent unpleasant encounter with Lockhart, this excitement was puzzling. Even Ron, Harry's close friend, shared Blake's confusion, looking at Harry as if he had witnessed something as improbable as Harry and Snape falling in love. A truly bizarre thought. Blake, intrigued, stroked his chin. Now this is getting interesting. By noon, a large duel stage had been erected in the center of the classroom, covered with a soft blue carpet to minimize the risk of injury. Lockhart, clad in a purple-red robe that made him stand out, stepped onto the stage. "Come closer, everyone. Can you all see me? Can you hear me?" His voice captured the attention of the students, who had been practicing independently, drawing them towards the duel platform. "That's right. At the request of both teachers and students, I've graciously agreed to serve as the guidance professor for this modest duel club," Lockhart announced, his tone dripping with false modesty. "I was hesitant at first, but your enthusiastic pleas were simply too compelling to ignore," he added, especially highlighting the supposed clamor from the school's most prominent figures. "Harry Potter!" The name echoed with a mixture of awe and excitement, hinting at the reverence even the Minister of Magic held for him. Harry, still basking in the thrill of the moment, suddenly froze as his own name pierced through the chatter. His heart skipped a beat, and he turned, his face draining of color, to see Blake casting a mischievous glance his way. Harry managed a strained, awkward smile in response. "Harry, you seemed off just now," Ron exclaimed, concern lacing his voice. "Did that bludger knock some sense out of you the other day? You actually asked Lockhart to be your advisor?" Harry's complexion turned even paler, if possible. "Sorry, Ron, I might not live to see another sunrise," he joked weakly, though the humor didn't quite reach his eyes. Blake has a reputation for holding grudges. Indeed, Harry had hoped Blake would teach Lockhart a lesson, but he hadn't anticipated Lockhart would foolishly reveal Harry's involvement. Reflecting on it, Harry realized he should have expected as much from Lockhart, a man notorious for basking in even the slightest bit of fame. It was Harry, after all, who had suggested Lockhart for the role, mistakenly believing it would remain a private arrangement. Lockhart's penchant for self-promotion should have been obvious. As Harry watched from the audience, his disappointment was palpable. Meanwhile, Lockhart, ever the showman, was thriving in the spotlight on stage. Since I've agreed to be the instructor, I'll ensure everyone is thoroughly trained, Lockhart announced with unwarranted confidence. Should the need arise to defend yourselves, you'll be equipped with the very techniques I've employed countless times for my own protection. And for those eager for more in-depth knowledge, my published works are always available. Lockhart's gaze then found Blake in the crowd. Now, allow me to introduce my assistant, Blake Green, a prodigiously talented young wizard whose accomplishments are already rivaling my own at his age. As the inaugural president of the Duel Club, he'll assist me with a demonstration today. But fear not, Lockhart added with a flourish. I assure you, your president will be returned to you unharmed. Ron leaned over to Harry, whispering, He's quite full of himself, isn't he? I have a feeling he's the one who won't be walking away from this unscathed. Yeah, Harry replied, his voice tinged with resignation. He shared Ron's sentiment, wishing Lockhart had simply kept his mouth shut. Blake, having no choice but to play along, forced a smile and made his way to the stage, slipping a ring onto his finger as he walked. Next to Lockhart's flamboyant demeanor, Blake's appearance was markedly understated, clad in his Hufflepuff uniform. Yet, as he faced Lockhart with a smile, there was an unmistakable air of confidence about him. Harry felt a chill run down his spine. If Blake's smile was anything to go by, he knew he was in for a rough time. Ron, take care of Hedwig for me, he muttered, half joking yet half serious, as he braced himself for what was to come. Chapter 279. Lockhart was ironclad. On the stage, Blake shook his hand, feeling his own strength surge. He then raised his head and addressed Professor Lockhart. In light of your remarkable adventures, you're presumed to be a very powerful wizard, so I'm going to give it my all. Do you have any objections? Hearing Blake refer to him as a powerful wizard filled Lockhart with a sudden burst of happiness. Of course I have no objection, he exclaimed. In fact, for a young wizard like you, even if you go all out, there's no way you can harm me at all. Lockhart's words were brimming with confidence, leaving Blake puzzled about the source of his self-assurance, given what he had seen of Lockhart's capabilities. But since Lockhart was so agreeable, Blake thought, okay, then I'll do my best. Choosing to use a second-hand wand, Blake was cautious. His own wand was too powerful, and he feared accidentally causing serious harm to Lockhart, which would spoil the fun. Today, Lockhart was present, and Blake intended to play this slowly, especially for those who had suffered permanent harm from Lockhart's forgetfulness spells. Under the watchful eyes of the audience, Blake and Lockhart faced each other and bowed, adhering to the dueling etiquette. Lockhart's wand performed some impressive tricks, and then they both held their wands to their chests, mimicking swords. As you can see, we are adopting a dueling stance, Blake announced. On the count of 3, we will cast our first spells. Of course, we will not aim to take each other's lives. 3, 2, 1, go! Both wizards raised their wands simultaneously. Blake shouted, Silencio! A blinding white light shot from Blake's wand, striking Lockhart squarely in the chest and causing him to stagger. Touching his chest in astonishment, Lockhart thought, it doesn't hurt. However, he quickly realized something was amiss. He found himself unable to open his mouth at all. His tongue was stuck to his upper teeth, and his lips were sealed shut. Lockhart looked at Blake in surprise, wondering about his intention. Was it to prevent him from reciting spells and fighting back? But Blake had other plans. With an exaggerated shout, he cast Expelliarmus. A dazzling red light burst forth, hitting Lockhart again. Lockhart felt his grip loosen, but to his astonishment, his hand was open, yet his wand remained firmly attached. What happened? Lockhart was bewildered. He hadn't done anything to cause this. He wanted to ask questions, but his sealed mouth made it impossible. Blake then cast another spell, and a dazzling white light hit Lockhart's chest once more, feeling like a whip. Lockhart wanted to scream, but his mouth wouldn't open, and his throat felt blocked, preventing even a whimper. Attempting to dodge, he found his body immobilized, caught under Blake's spell. Blake continued his assault, casting spell after spell, marking Lockhart's body with white flashes. Despite this, Lockhart remained silent and motionless. The audience was in awe. It's incredible. Blake is amazing. No, I mean Lockhart. What? Look, he didn't dodge or flinch. He just took Blake's spells without making a sound or moving. Is it true? Did we misjudge him? Is he really a powerful wizard? Yeah. Look, Blake's spells can't hurt him at all. The audience was abuzz with speculation, but on stage, Lockhart was nearing his limit. Was it because Lockhart found himself unable to speak, his body frozen in place as if bound by an invisible force? His wand, too, seemed to have become an extension of his hand, immovable and unyielding. The options that might have crossed anyone's mind in such a situation, screaming for help, attempting to dodge the incoming spells, or even throwing the wand away in surrender, were all beyond his reach. Blake's spell, though not strong enough to render him unconscious, inflicted a pain that was almost unbearable. It was as though he was being whipped, yet the spell was peculiar. It left no physical marks on his clothes or skin. It was as if the whip lashed at his soul directly. "Professor Lockhart, that's amazing!" Blake exclaimed, feigning admiration. "It's just a protective spell that I can't break." "Ah, I understand now, Professor. You remained motionless to test whether I could break your protective spell," Blake concluded, as if having an epiphany. The audience, misled by Blake's words, erupted into discussions. Some praised Lockhart's supposed resilience, while others reconsidered their previous underestimation of his abilities. However, a few spectators sensed that something was amiss, choosing to observe in silence rather than join the chatter. Lockhart, on the brink of tears, was in turmoil. He had no protective spells in place. The notion that he was enduring the onslaught to test Blake's strength was absurd. The guilt and injustice of the situation weighed heavily on him, yet he felt powerless to defend his reputation. Just as Lockhart thought the ordeal was over, having been hit by Blake's banishing spell and sent flying, he experienced a momentary relief. However, this was short-lived. His robe tightened around him, and he was pulled back to the stage by Blake's use of the flying curse. Internally, Lockhart despaired, facing yet another round of merciless attacks. Then, amidst the chaos, a spell from Blake caused a cloud of smoke to envelop the stage. Through the haze, Blake's voice reached Lockhart, taunting him with names of individuals he had wronged in the past. Lockhart's heart sank as Blake insinuated that among those he had harmed were friends of Professor Dumbledore. The implication that Dumbledore had hired him as a defense against the dark arts professor to expose his fraudulent past was terrifying. Lockhart realized that maintaining his facade of a powerful wizard would be impossible under such scrutiny. What Lockhart didn't know was that Blake's accusations were entirely fabricated. If Dumbledore was aware of the victims, these words were sufficient to instill fear in Lockhart. "For the time being, Professor Dumbledore harbors suspicions towards you," Blake revealed, his tone even but laden with implications. "He brought you on board primarily to keep an eye on you, to scrutinize your every move. However, I possess exactly what he's been seeking." Blake continued, his gaze piercing. "So, to preserve your facade, I presume you understand the necessary steps you must take next, correct?" Lockhart's eyes darted frantically, a clear attempt to convey his comprehension. Having been cornered, Lockhart found himself without the courage to defy Blake. As the smoke that had enveloped the room began to clear, Lockhart discovered his mobility returning, his mouth no longer sealed shut. Casting a terrified glance at Blake, he stammered, "Ahem! Aha! Your leadership is indeed formidable." He added hastily, "I believe there's no need for a supervising professor in your case." With those words, Lockhart, still trembling, hurried out of the clubroom under Blake's significant look. The room fell into a stunned silence. It was evident to all present that something profound had transpired. Reflecting on the encounter, it became clear that Blake had dominated the conversation, while Lockhart had remained silent throughout. Indeed, if Lockhart had truly been in control, he would have stood his ground. Yet, the absence of any response from him spoke volumes. Typically, a supervisor offers guidance, especially someone as notoriously verbose as Lockhart. His sudden silence could only mean one thing: he had been rendered speechless at that moment. After piecing together the clues, the conclusion was unmistakable. Blake had immobilized Lockhart and then intimidated him into submission, leaving Lockhart too frightened to utter a single word. Harry, who had secretly relished the thought of Lockhart being put in his place, was jolted back to reality by a sudden touch on his shoulder. I was informed by Professor Lockhart that he accepted the advisory role at your behest. Harry turned to find Blake standing behind him, a smile playing on his lips. Face D with Blake's unsettling calm, Harry's thoughts raced to the point of drafting a mental suicide note. Chapter 280, Blake's True Intentions and the Armenian Old Wizard. Blake had no intention of harming Harry. His focus was on dealing with Lockhart, and Harry's actions merely expedited the process. With the mystery of the Chamber of Secrets resolved and the basilisk neutralized, the original fate that awaited Lockhart, being struck by his own obliviate spell due to Ron's malfunctioning wand, was averted. However, Blake was determined not to let Lockhart escape the consequences of his actions. Understanding the severe repercussions of a potent obliviate spell, which could cause irreversible damage as it did to Lockhart in the original story, Blake was aware that Lockhart's ambition to maintain his facade likely led to more than just memory erasure for his victims. Eliminating Lockhart would have been simple for Blake, but murder was not an option within the walls of Hogwarts. More importantly, Blake believed that Lockhart should endure the repercussions of his deceit. Since Lockhart prized his reputation above all, Blake decided that this was precisely where his punishment should begin. Following Lockhart's hasty retreat from the dueling club meeting, the session concluded prematurely. The students, now in small groups, practiced on their own, but couldn't help discussing the evening's events. The sight of a professor being outmatched by a student and fleeing without a word was certainly a topic of intrigue. As Blake exited the classroom, his system space was enriched with more than 10 bronze treasure chests. Cassandra and others were eager to inquire about the incident, having sensed something amiss, but Blake had vanished by the time they decided to approach him. Lockhart, meanwhile, rushed back to his office and frantically began packing his belongings. The portraits of him that adorned the walls recoiled in fear, sensing the urgency of his actions. Lockhart's mind was consumed by a single thought: escape. Aware of his own reprehensible deeds, he believed fleeing was his only option, especially if Blake had evidence of his misconduct. Imagining a scenario where he could manipulate his departure to appear as a victim of jealousy and slander at Hogwarts, Lockhart packed with renewed vigor. However, Lockhart's plan was flawed. The exposure of his actions would inevitably lead to an investigation into the victims of his obliviate spells. Despite his belief that he could erase any trace of his spells from his wand, the potential damage to his reputation was undeniable. The realization that evidence of his use of the obliviate spell could be uncovered filled him with panic and frustration. Lockhart was caught in a web of his own deceit, realizing too late that his actions could have lasting consequences not just for his victims, but for his cherished reputation as well. No, I can't allow my resume and reputation to be tarnished, not even slightly. There must be a way out. Lockhart realized he had stopped packing. He sat on his suitcase, frantically running his fingers through his neat, shiny blonde hair. How did this happen? I was so careful, ensuring no one was around. How did Blake Green uncover these things? He paused, his mind racing. Wait! A realization struck him. Blake's intention was to blackmail him, not to expose him directly to Dumbledore. This meant there was still a chance to salvage the situation. Blake must want something from him, a favor or a service perhaps. Lockhart's spirits lifted at this thought. To him, being blackmailed seemed a small price to pay to protect his reputation. It was a peculiar way of thinking, perhaps a desperate attempt to avoid facing the imminent collapse of his carefully constructed facade. What does Blake want from me? After much deliberation, Lockhart concluded that Blake, like him, sought fame and recognition. Despite knowing very little, Lockhart was adept at managing his public image. If that's the case, with renewed purpose, Lockhart ceased his packing and began to write a letter. You attacked Professor Lockhart? Dumbledore inquired, his gaze fixed and the books on his desk, making it hard for Blake to read his expression. Yes, Blake admitted, expecting a reprimand. I assumed you'd offer some justification. After all, attacking a professor is a serious matter. Dumbledore finally looked up, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I don't see it as attacking a professor. Before the duel, he urged me to use my full strength. He didn't surrender or disarm, so I assumed the duel was ongoing. Dumbledore's smile became more apparent. I see. And why have you come to me? Professor Lockhart hasn't lodged any complaints. I'm here to request a leave of absence for a long journey, Blake explained. Dumbledore removed his glasses, considering Blake with a quiet intensity before replacing them. Very well. Avoid Nermangard, but otherwise, you have my blessing. Just inform me upon your return. Thank you, Professor, Blake said, turning to leave. Dumbledore's voice stopped him. You must be curious why I brought Lockhart back as a professor. I was initially, Blake admitted, turning back. But I've come to understand your reasoning. Oh, and what might that be? Dumbledore asked, genuinely intrigued. 2 reasons, Blake began. First, his deceitful nature would be exposed in a school environment. Second, you wanted to teach us a lesson on the dangers of deceit and the importance of integrity. By experiencing our disdain for Lockhart, we're less likely to emulate him. Dumbledore sighed, a mixture of admiration and surprise in his voice. Your insight exceeds my expectations. I thought you'd question my decision to hire him, but it seems I underestimated you. Take Nagini with you on your journey. She'll be of assistance. And if you could, greet Rep Carlos of Armenia for me. Just remember, avoid Nermangard at all costs. As Blake left Dumbledore's office, he was struck by a realization. His offhand comments to Lockhart had inadvertently revealed a deeper truth. Dumbledore was indeed aware of Lockhart's past misdeeds and had hired him as a professor not just to expose him, but to impart a valuable lesson on integrity and the consequences of deceit. Dumbledore had always been a figure shrouded in mystery, and Blake couldn't help but admire the man's foresight. He had correctly surmised Blake's intention to seek out those wizards who had suffered at the hands of others. Yet Dumbledore was unaware of Blake's deeper motive. The journey to confront Lockhart was merely a piece of a larger puzzle. It was a cold, dark night in a small, dilapidated village in Armenia. The remnants of once sturdy walls now lay in ruins, a testament to the village's long-forgotten defeat. In one of the crumbling houses, a frail old man sought refuge. The biting cold wind found its way through the gaps, chilling him to the bone. Hunger gnawed at him as he huddled for warmth, his strength waning. Suddenly, the oppressive chill ceased, and the room inexplicably warmed. Light filled the space, banishing the shadows. The old man, bewildered, lifted his head. 2 figures in black cloaks had appeared, one of them cradling a pot of sunflowers that radiated warmth and light. The sight of the flowers left the old man in awe. Never in his life had he witnessed such beauty. He murmured something in Armenian, a question born of his confusion and fear. He's asking if we are messengers sent by the god of death, Nagini translated, her knowledge of the language coming as a surprise to Blake. Tell him we are not death's heralds, Blake instructed. We are here to offer him a chance at rebirth. Nagini relayed the message, and the old man's eyes widened in disbelief. For the first time, he noticed that one of the cloaked figures was a woman, and the other a mere child. The sight of a wand in the child's hand was the last thing he remembered before darkness claimed him. When he awoke, the squalor that had defined his existence had vanished. The house was now as warm as spring, a stark contrast to the ruin it had been. Lockhart's oblivion curse erased all his memories. Blah, he explained. He forgot his name, his past, and his magic. He became nothing more than a helpless old man. Nagini looked at the old wizard, now resting peacefully. Is he the one Lockhart wrote about in Wandering with Werewolves? Blake nodded, then addressed the question of restoring the man's memory. It's unnecessary. His memories have been reclaimed by me. He elaborated on the nature of memory and the soul, explaining how, despite the physical erasure of memories, a backup exists deep within the soul. This was why some, like Hermione with her parents, could recover from the effects of a memory charm. Lockhart's curse was potent, but not beyond repair for someone versed in the arts of necromancy. As the old wizard awoke, confusion gave way to realization. Speaking in halting English, he expressed his gratitude to Blake for restoring his identity and memories. Tears streamed down his face as he recounted the hardships of living as a muggle, forgotten by the world he once knew. Thank you, truly, thank you, he whispered, acknowledging the end of his life was near. In my final moments, you've given me back my identity. For that, I am eternally grateful. Though the old wizard had regained his memories, he remained in the twilight of his life, a life that had been marked by loss and struggle. Yet, in his final days, he found solace in remembering who he once was, thanks to the kindness of strangers. Living a life akin to that of a vagabond had taken its toll on him, pushing his body to its very limits. "No, Mr. Carlos, as long as I'm here, you won't die," Blake assured, presenting a bottle of potion with a hopeful gesture. "This is a potion formula I've developed myself. Please drink it if you trust me." The potion, designed to extend life, not only delayed aging, but also boosted vitality. Skeptical, the old wizard doubted the efficacy of a magic potion concocted by someone so young. Yet Blake's earnestness made it difficult for him to decline the offer. Upon consuming the potion, the old wizard was taken aback by its immediate effects. A surge of strength, long absent, coursed through his frail body, and he sensed his dwindling magical powers beginning to rejuvenate. Observing the transformation, Blake noticed a renewed spark in the wizard's eyes, a clear sign of his rekindled will to live. At that moment, a notification rang in Blake's mind. Ding! A potential follower has been detected. Would the host like to include him? This was the Eye of Truth at work. As Blake watched, the aura above the old wizard's head shifted from white to gold, a smile creeping onto Blake's face. This was precisely why he had embarked on his journey. Contrary to what some believed, Lockhart's book wasn't entirely fabricated. Many of the adventures it recounted were based on truth. How could a wizard capable of such feats be considered weak? "System, proceed with the inclusion," Blake commanded, ready to welcome the old wizard into his fold. This encounter underscored the essence of his quest, to uncover hidden truths and potential allies in the most unexpected places. Chapter 281. Perhaps you can call me the fourth natural disaster. Following Blake's contemplation, Rip Carlos's name materialized on the list. In the next moment, a warm sensation enveloped Blake's body, making him feel lighter, an unmistakable sign of enhanced physical strength. Concurrently, a ring on Blake's finger cracked, a clear indication that his magical power had surged beyond the ring's capacity to contain it. Blake understood this as the system's way of augmenting his attributes in response to recruiting a new subordinate. This was not the first time he had experienced such feedback. However, the magnitude was significantly greater this time around. Previously, when Filch was recruited, the system's feedback was minimal, given Filch's nascent wizarding abilities. But Rip Carlos was a different case altogether. A formidable wizard in both skill and magical prowess, Carlos had single-handedly repelled a pack of werewolves from his village. His inclusion in Blake's ranks, especially now that he had regained his memory, promised a substantial boost. Although his physical condition was yet to fully recover, his knowledge and skills heralded the return of a powerful wizard. "Thanks, I feel much better," Rip exclaimed, his voice robust with newfound vigor. The frailty of his form seemed to dissipate, replaced by a rejuvenated vitality. At that moment, Nagini approached with a steaming bowl of porridge, offering it to Rip. Despite his initial lack of appetite, the sight and smell of the hot meal stirred a hunger within him. "Eat first. We'll talk later when you're full," Blake suggested kindly, his expression calm yet inwardly. He was ecstatic. Through the directory, he had discovered that Rip's potential rivaled that of Dumbledore himself, a realization akin to striking gold. Blake couldn't help but marvel at the prospect of recruiting other wizards who had fallen victim to Lockhart's machinations. How could a wizard of such caliber fall prey to someone like Lockhart? Blake pondered as Rip savored the last grains of rice from his bowl, expressing heartfelt gratitude for the meal. "Ah! It's been so long since I've had hot food. Thank you, dear girl. Your porridge is delicious," Rip praised, his eyes twinkling with appreciation. Nagini smiled, taking the empty bowl and setting it aside. Rip's gaze then shifted to Blake, his eyes reflecting a profound sense of loyalty and gratitude. Even without the influence of the system's recruitment, Rip felt a deep-seated desire to protect Blake, the person who had not only saved his life, but also restored his most precious possession, his magic. "Can you tell me how Lockhart did this to you?" Blake inquired, eager to unravel the mystery. Rip sighed. "Well, he was quite the smooth talker. He claimed to be a writer from England, interested in chronicling my exploits. Naively, I shared my story with him. Not long after, The werewolves I had driven off returned, seeking vengeance. I prepared to confront them once more, but then— Rip paused, pointing to his back. That despicable Lockhart cast the Obliviate curse on me. The spell's potency was overwhelming. When I awoke, I had forgotten my own name and my ability to wield magic. All I found was a devastated village. How I survived the werewolves after falling under the curse's spell remains a mystery to me. Those villagers— Rip's voice trailed off, the memory too painful to recount in full. Blake listened intently, his resolve to protect his newfound ally and to right the wrongs inflicted by Lockhart only strengthening. The old wizard's eyes blazed with a vengeful red glow. So, if you're aware of Lockhart's whereabouts— Despite maintaining a calm tone, a chilling, murderous aura emanated from him. He has risen to become the best-selling author in the wizarding world by exploiting your achievements. Professor Dumbledore, upon uncovering the truth, brought him into Hogwarts as the defense against the dark arts professor, Blake explained. It seems Dumbledore hoped that by doing so, Lockhart's deceit would come to light. However, I'm not inclined towards such a lenient approach, Blake added, his voice taking on a frosty edge. He had initially believed that Lockhart's transgressions were limited to erasing memories, not taking lives, suggesting a semblance of a moral boundary. Yet, the reality was starkly different. Lockhart had shown a complete disregard for the lives of the villagers, culminating in the village's devastation. The only survivor was a man left without his memories, a shell of his former self amidst the ruins. It's been only a few years since I fell victim to the Obliviate curse, so— Old Lep's voice was thick with vengeance. Those werewolves, the architects of the village's downfall, must still be lurking nearby. Blake inquired. Do you know their location? I do, although I'm uncertain if they've relocated over the years, Old Lep replied. Their leader hailed from Wagga Wagga, Australia. They used to raid our village until I managed to fend them off. But then he amassed a pack of werewolves, launching assaults on humans. I had planned to eradicate those werewolves that day, but if only Lockhart had waited a day before attacking me, my disdain for him wouldn't run as deep. Blake then presented a package to Old Lep. First, take a shower and change into some fresh clothes. This package contains new garments and a wand, anticipating your needs. Old Lep's gaze softened as he looked at Blake. Thank you, young man. What is your name? My name is Blake Green, or if you prefer, you can call me the Fourth Scourge. Chapter 282, Warm Porridge and the Werewolf Hunt? This elder is remarkably formidable. The term Fourth Disaster was inspired by a game that Blake had played in his previous life. In the game's later stages, players would face 3 major natural disasters that threatened to destroy the world. However, the actions of the players introduced a level of unpredictability. Some players, seeking novelty or simply out of boredom, would summon various bosses to cause chaos and destruction, only to later step in as the heroes who would eliminate these threats. The havoc wreaked by such players was comparable to that of the game's final boss. Thus, these players were humorously dubbed the Fourth Natural Disaster, following the game's 3 major calamities. Blake, contemplating the formation of his own force and the need for a pseudonym to conceal his identity, found the title of Fourth Natural Disaster to be fitting. He was unaware of the profound impact his arrival as a player would have on the world. Old Rep, quick to grasp the significance of the codename, agreed, "All right, when you wish to remain anonymous, I'll refer to you as the Fourth Natural Disaster. At all other times, you'll be Blake to me." Blake nodded in agreement, then added, "By the way, Professor Dumbledore sends his regards." A flicker of recognition crossed Rep's eyes. "Albus, yes, I remember now. He visited me the year of my accident. But back then, I couldn't remember anything, and my mind was still clouded," Rep continued. "So when I saw someone approaching, I hid." Blake, surprised, asked, "How did you manage to evade Professor Dumbledore, especially when you had forgotten all your magic?" Old Rep pointed towards a sliding door on the floor of the dilapidated house. "There was a basement underneath here," he explained. "I had set up quite a few magical protections around it. Even Albus would have struggled to find it without a clue." Rep's voice carried a hint of pride as he recounted. "But it wasn't long before it collapsed. The traceless stretch spell, if not maintained, can lose its effectiveness. Once the spell fails, the expanded space collapses as it reverts to its original size. If not for that, I could have at least taken shelter in the basement during the cold. Blake walked over to the sliding door, examining it closely. The ancient runes inscribed on the door were unlike anything he had seen before. Even Dumbledore might not have been able to detect this door before the rune's magic expired, he thought aloud. Old Rep, are you also versed in ancient runes? Blake inquired. I wouldn't say I'm just versed. I'm quite proficient, Rep corrected. I've always believed that the study of ancient runes is grossly underrated. Blake responded enthusiastically. Professor Babbling and I share the same opinion. He then produced a card-shaped magic scroll from his hand, offering it to Rep. Take a look at this. Upon seeing the card, Rep's eyes sparkled with excitement. He examined the card intently, murmuring, So that's how it's done. Fascinating. A look of astonishment appeared on Rep's face. I've considered similar ideas, but they didn't always work. The ancient runes I inscribed either couldn't be preserved or were triggered prematurely. So, the issue lies with the materials and this additional component, Rep pondered. It's not part of any known ancient runes, yet it functions like a fuse in a muggle bomb, delaying activation. Holding the card-shaped magic scroll, Rep sighed, a mixture of relief and satisfaction washing over him. A problem that had stumped him for years was suddenly resolved, a feeling indescribably pleasant. Did you create this, or was it Professor Babbling you mentioned? Rep inquired. Blake replied, I crafted this, but Professor Babbling and I share similar views on ancient runes. Is it really you? Rep looked at Blake, his surprise evident. Even after years of research, the solution had eluded him, yet here it was, presented by someone he had only just met. He remained loyal to Blake, but the directory only influenced loyalty, not any other thoughts of those included. Initially, I believed this magical card scroll was developed by Professor Babbling. To my surprise, it was the young man before me. Ding! Shock detected. Ding! Congratulations to the host for receiving a silver treasure chest. Thus, Old Lep inadvertently contributed a treasure chest to Blake. Compared to your achievements, I truly feel inadequate, Old Lep admitted, feeling somewhat disheartened. Despite his years of research, he had yet to find a solution. Yet, here was this young man, who had managed to unravel a mystery that had baffled him for years. Old Lep, you've lost several years of precious research time. Otherwise, you would have undoubtedly solved it, Blake said, not to flatter but to state a fact. The ancient runes on the door hinted at a solution, one that Old Lep was close to discovering. If not for unfortunate circumstances, he would have succeeded by now. Two Heart's selfish curse of oblivion did more than harm a village. It impeded the progress of an entire field, even the wizarding world at large. I've set up a tent outside. It's designed for travel and fully equipped. You can rest there tonight. Tomorrow, once you're ready, we'll confront those werewolves, Blake proposed. Old Lep, however, was eager. Why wait until tomorrow to deal with those werewolves? He picked up the wand Blake had given him, noting, the dragon heartstring core is excellent. Blake observed the wand reacting to Old Lep, a sign of a wand acknowledging its new master. This wand suits you well, but it doesn't seem like it's from Ollivander's? Blake revealed he had crafted the wand himself, impressing Old Lep further. You can make wands too? Old Lep was astounded. Blake's wand craftsmanship surpassed even Ollivander's, showcasing his multifaceted genius. Just wait here. I'll be back soon. Oh, kind girl, could you warm up another bowl of porridge for me? I'd like to have it when I return, Old Lep requested before stepping out, full of newfound vigor for revenge. Nagini watched in amazement as the once frail wizard now radiated energy and determination. Blake, that potion of yours is truly remarkable, she remarked. Blake modestly replied, It's not the potion, but his strong foundation that's making the difference. Having such a formidable ally only added to Blake's contentment, especially knowing that his directory could further enhance his ally's strengths, rewarding him with attribute bonuses. Blake, is it really wise to let him go alone? Shouldn't we assist him? Nagini expressed her concern, recalling Old Lep's earlier condition. Don't worry, just prepare another bowl of porridge. Actually, I'll do it, Blake decided. Old Lep returned swiftly, enjoying the still warm porridge. Nagini saw no apparent change in him, wondering if he had merely taken a brief walk. However, Blake sensed a profound transformation. Sitting across from Old Lep, he could feel the difference. Facing a freshly sharpened knife, the morning air was crisp and filled with the sounds of packing. Nagini was efficiently packing up the tent, her movements swift and practiced. Old Lep, on the other hand, was trying to help, but his efforts were more of a hindrance. Eventually, Nagini, running out of patience with his clumsy attempts, gently pushed him towards Blake, suggesting he might be of better use there. "Oh, Blake, you really must appreciate her. She's a remarkable girl," Old Lep said, a stark contrast to his forlorn appearance the night before. He had cleaned up, donning new black clothes, and even his previously unkempt hair was now neatly trimmed. His angular face, now more visible, hinted at the handsome man he once was in his youth. Blake couldn't help but notice an additional piece of jewelry around Lep's neck, a necklace with a pendant that was unmistakably a werewolf's tooth. Curiosity piqued, Blake asked, "How did you manage to find me?" Old Lep, lighting an old pipe he had retrieved from his dilapidated house the night before, took a moment before answering. "Armenia is both vast and confined in its own ways. Finding you was no small feat. It's just, Lockhart has taken your adventures as his own and turned them into a novel. And that fool didn't even bother to change the name of the place," Blake said, pulling out a book. The cover featured Lockhart, sporting a grin that showcased 7 gleaming teeth. "Wandering with Werewolves?" I had hoped for a more imaginative title. Old Lep took the book, flipping through it with a mix of amusement and disdain. "Ha, I must admit, as irritating as he is, the man has a knack for storytelling." A mischievous glint appeared in his eyes as he mused. "Perhaps we should capture him, incapacitate him, and confine him to a dark room. He could write books for us, and we could profit from his tales." This suggestion, dark yet tinged with humor, highlighted the complex relationship between the characters and the world they inhabited, a world where justice and revenge often intertwined in unexpected ways. Chapter 283, Residents of the Permanent Ward, Mr. and Mrs. Longbottom. "Where are we headed next?" Old Rip inquired, aware that Blake's mission seemed to focus on rescuing wizards who had been wronged by Lockhart, just as he had been. Given that they were the only ones traveling together at the moment, it implied that he was the first person Blake had rescued. "Our next destination is Bandon." "Let me check. It appears to be in Ireland," Blake responded, pulling out another of Lockhart's books and flipping through it. Old Rip caught a glimpse of the title, which seemed to be Breaking with the Banshee. "So, that fool documented all the evidence and clues in his books?" Blake nodded in confirmation. Old Rip's face contorted with frustration. "It's utterly disgraceful to have been outwitted by such a fool." Thanks to Blake's potion, Old Rip's health had significantly improved. His posture was no longer stooped, and it was only then that Blake realized Old Rip was actually quite tall. "So how do we plan to travel to Bandon? Ireland is quite a distance. Surely, we can't walk there," Old Rip pondered, curious about the means of their travel, especially considering Blake's journey from England to Armenia and now the proposed trip to Ireland. "There's a way, a very efficient one," Blake assured. "And what might that be?" Old Rip asked, just as Blake was about to demonstrate the use of a dimensional door. Suddenly, a faint blue light flashed, and Feng Huang Qingnu, a majestic ice crystal phoenix, appeared before Blake, holding a letter in her beak. She landed on a stone, casting a curious glance at Old Rip before delivering the letter to Blake. "Good heavens! An ice crystal phoenix! I must say, this is far more beautiful than Albus's fire phoenix," Old Rip exclaimed in admiration. "Tweet, you have quite the eye, old man." Qingnu seemed to take an immediate liking to Old Rip upon hearing his praise. After reading the letter, Blake announced, "It seems our journey to Bandon is no longer necessary." "Oh, has the individual from the book moved from Bandon, or has something happened to her?" Old Rip, recalling his own near-death experience, feared for the safety of others who might have suffered similarly. "No, that's not it. She was taken to St. Tor Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries by Professor Dumbledore quite some time ago," Blake clarified. "There's another person with her. They're currently in the permanent ward of the Spell Damage Department on the 5th floor." Blake then pulled out another of Lockhart's books, Holidays with Hags, indicating that the protagonist of this book was also in the same ward. If they're together, that simplifies things. But I wonder why Professor Dumbledore didn't inform me of this when I departed, Blake mused, somewhat frustrated. Old Rip chuckled. That's because you don't quite understand Albus. He's someone who prefers to operate within the rules. I suppose he only managed to arrange their care at St. Mungo's today, Blake speculated. You mean he's been negotiating with St. Mungo's during this time? Blake asked. If my guess is correct, you should head to St. Mungo's now and introduce yourself. I'm certain someone will escort you directly to them, Old Rip advised, puffing on his pipe. All right then, Blake agreed, putting away the book. By then, Nagini had efficiently packed up their entire camp into a backpack enchanted with an extension charm. Blake, we're ready to go. But Old Rip, are you sure you want to leave this place? Blake asked, noticing Old Rip's contemplative gaze over the deserted village, possibly for the last time, as he had no plans to return. Let's go, Old Rip finally said, his voice tinged with a hint of sadness. Blake nodded, then raised his hand to draw a circle in the air. Sparks flew, and a dimensional gate materialized before them. Good heavens! Old Rip exclaimed, dropping his pipe in astonishment at the sight. Ding! An extremely shocked emotion detected. Ding! Congratulations to the host for receiving a golden treasure chest. Blake couldn't help but grin, feeling a sense of accomplishment. Carefully, Old Rip followed Blake and Nagini through the dimensional gate, his eyes wide with wonder as he took in their new surroundings, a hidden alley, clearly a departure from their previous location. Upon arriving in the city, Old Lep experienced a surge of novelty. One moment, he was in a secluded mountain village, and the next, he found himself amidst the bustling streets of a major city. The transition was so seamless it left him astounded. Blake, where are we? Old Lep inquired, his gaze fixed on the towering buildings that lined the alleyway. This is London, Blake responded. London? In England? Old Lep's astonishment caused his pipe, already marred with cracks, to tumble to the ground once more. A voice chimed in his head. Extreme shock detected. Congratulations to the host for receiving a golden treasure chest. Despite the notification, Old Lep's attention remained on his surroundings, marveling at the distance they had covered from Armenia to the UK in mere moments. Blake's casual creation of a portal had far surpassed the capabilities of apparition. Old Lep realized that with such magic at their disposal, conventional means like portkeys were rendered obsolete. Their destination was St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries, discreetly located within London's old red-brick Clearwater department store. To the uninitiated Muggle, the entrance bore a closed for renovation sign, but wizards knew better. A simple explanation to an unattractive doll by the window was enough to gain entry, reminiscent of the magical barrier that led to Platform 9 3/4. Upon entering St. Mungo's, the trio was immediately greeted by the sight of patients afflicted with bizarre magical ailments. A man with a toilet fused to his head and another whose left arm had transformed into a cactus were among the peculiar cases that caught Blake's eye. He couldn't help but wonder about the daily mishaps that led to such unusual conditions, silently commending the hospital's staff for their dedication to treating such extraordinary injuries. The lobby was bustling with activity. Visitors inquired about ward numbers and floors, while therapists in dark green robes navigated through the crowd. Blake's attention was drawn to the information desk, where a sign prominently displayed a message for those unsure of their purpose there. Behind the desk, a witch in a similar dark green robe was caught napping, a stark contrast to the busy atmosphere around her. Hello. Blake approached the desk, prompting a startled reaction from the witch. I wasn't sleeping, she exclaimed defensively, her eyes still closed. It was clear this wasn't her first time dozing off on the job. Upon realizing that Blake was not her supervisor, she sighed in relief. Oh, hello. I'm Tris Pye, a trainee therapist, she introduced herself, her tone shifting to one of professionalism. Did you, by any chance, consume poisonous mushrooms? Some can cause hallucinations. When it became apparent she had guessed incorrectly, Tris's demeanor faltered. My brother always said I wouldn't make a good therapist, she lamented, then quickly redirected the conversation. So, what brings you here? We're here to visit patients. Blake finally managed to say, after patiently listening to her ramblings. "They're in the permanent ward of the Curse Injury Department on the 5th floor." Tris consulted her notebook, flipping through the pages. The patients in the permanent ward include Frank Longbottom, Alice Longbottom, Broderick Boded, and Agnes and Agatha. Which one would you like to visit? Blake's ears perked up at the mention of the Longbottoms, a wave of emotion washing over him. He recalled the tragic fate of Neville's parents, who were subjected to the Cruciatus Curse by Death Eaters. Though they survived, the aftermath of their torture left them with severe, seemingly irreversible damage, confining them to the permanent ward of the Spell Damage Department on the 5th floor of St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. These individuals were valiant fighters against Voldemort, yet their journey ended in such a heartbreaking manner on the cusp of victory. Heroes, Blake thought, deserved a better fate. "I want to visit them," Blake declared firmly. Tris, caught off guard by Blake's request, looked at him with a mix of surprise and confusion. She thought his request unusual, saying, "They're not exactly." "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply anything inappropriate," she stammered, apologizing hastily for her awkward phrasing. "My name is Blake Green," he introduced himself, hoping to clarify his intentions. You're Blake Green? Then by all means." Tris's demeanor shifted back to her initial cheerfulness. "Please follow me. I received a notice just this morning. With your status, you're granted permission to visit the patients in the permanent ward on the 5th floor whenever you wish." "Just visiting?" Blake's eyes sparkled with a hint of intrigue. Could it be that Dumbledore anticipated his decision to visit? The 5th floor housed many permanent wards, yet it was no coincidence that the two individuals he was interested in were in the same ward as the Longbottoms. Blake quickly pieced together Dumbledore's potential motive. Was the headmaster suggesting that if Blake could aid these two patients, there might be hope for the Longbottoms as well? This old man is truly fascinating, Blake mused. Why not just communicate his intentions directly? It's exhausting to decipher these hints. If it weren't for our existing connection, I might have suspected him of testing me. Chapter 284. I'm going to crush Lockhart's balls. At St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries, on the 5th floor, within the Curse Damage Department, Blake arrived with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. It was here, in the Janus Thicky ward, also known as Ward 49, that he realized perhaps he had overthought the situation. Named after individuals, as was the custom with wards at St. Mungo's, this particular ward was the only permanent one on the entire floor. Contrary to his expectations, Dumbledore hadn't made any special arrangements. The reality was stark in its simplicity. Given the advanced healing capabilities of wizards, it was rare for any ailment to be deemed incurable, with brain injuries being among the few exceptions. Theresa Pye had escorted Blake and his companions to the 5th floor before promptly departing. She had been instructed to do so, ensuring that if a boy named Blake Green arrived, she was to lead them up and then leave them to their privacy. As Blake pushed open the door to the corridor, he noted its brevity, housing only 2 rooms. One appeared to be the attending physician's office, its door ajar and devoid of presence, save for a cup of steaming tea left hastily on the table. It was clear the doctor had left in a hurry, a testament to Dumbledore's meticulous planning for the day. Proceeding to ward number 49, Blake opened the door to find a middle-aged man with disheveled hair and a sallow complexion squatting on a coffee table, his gaze fixed forward in a trance. The table, burdened by his weight, was on the verge of collapse. "What are you doing?" Blake inquired, only to be met with silence as the man briefly glanced at him before resuming his stare. "Aren't you tired of squatting like that?" Blake pressed, receiving no response. Yet he persisted. "If you break the coffee table, do you intend to pay for it?" The man finally retorted, "The coffee table can easily be mended with a repair spell. Why should I pay for it?" Surprised, Blake responded, "You're aware of that, so you must be fine." The man shot back, "I'm disturbed, not foolish." Feeling somewhat belittled, Blake asked, "Your name is Broderick Bode?" "No, I'm merely a teapot," the man quipped, leaving Blake to recall another patient who, after an attack by a Death Eater, believed himself to be a teapot and eventually met a tragic end. Confused, Blake pondered the man's smooth speech, despite supposedly having lost his ability to speak. It dawned on him that Bode, a former employee of the Department of Mysteries, shouldn't have been admitted until 1995. Blake wondered if his presence had inadvertently altered the timeline. "You're not a teapot, Bode. You can't pour tea," Blake ventured. "I can," Bode asserted confidently. "You can?" Blake challenged. "Don't believe me?" Bode countered. "I don't," Blake admitted. "I'll prove it," Bode declared, beginning to loosen his pants. "Stop! I believe you." Blake hastily interjected, while Lowrep, unable to contain his amusement, laughed heartily. It was a rare sight to see Blake, usually so composed, caught off guard. Even Nagini couldn't suppress a smile at the scene unfolding before them. This encounter in the Janice Thicky ward was a stark reminder of the complexities and unexpected moments that lay within the walls of St. Mungo's, a place where the line between reality and delusion often blurred, yet also where moments of levity could be found in the most unlikely circumstances. Blake spoke with a calm assurance. "Psychosis may seem invincible, but give me a moment, and I'll attend to it. I'm curious to see if your resolve remains as strong afterward." Ward number 49 was spacious, divided into cubicles to provide each patient with a semblance of privacy. Near the entrance, Bode's bed was positioned, though he showed a peculiar preference for transforming into a teapot on the coffee table rather than resting in his bed. The second cubicle housed two beds, occupied by a man and a woman sitting silently, each lost in their own world. Their expressions void of any emotion, their eyes reflecting a profound emptiness, as if their souls had been eroded away. The woman absent-mindedly clutched a candy wrapper, a detail that led Blake to the realization that these were Neville Longbottom's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Longbottom. A brief examination was enough for Blake to discern the depth of their affliction. Their spirits were significantly damaged, presenting a challenging yet not insurmountable task. Moving on, Blake encountered another pair in the subsequent cubicle. These two witches appeared physically frail, their faces etched with the toll of their suffering. One was attempting to write, while the other arranged flowers on a table, both actions seemingly simple yet monumental for them. Upon noticing Blake and his companions, they looked up with a mix of confusion and curiosity, their memories evidently fragmented. It was clear that these patients were faring somewhat better than the others in the ward, grappling primarily with memory loss. The prescribed treatment involved relearning skills in hopes of reclaiming their lost memories, a slow and uncertain process that offered a chance at a fresh start rather than a true recovery. However, Blake was determined not to let them languish in this state of limbo. He believed in their potential for a brighter future, beyond the dubious achievements chronicled in Lockhart's books. Turning to Old Rep, Blake was about to issue instructions when Old Rep suggested he would stand guard. Blake quickly dismissed the need, confident in his mastery of soul magic, honed through his encounters with Voldemort's residual soul. Restoring the memories of these two witches would be a simpler task than addressing the delusions of the man who believed himself to be a teapot. With a mutual understanding, Nagini retrieved two packages from his backpack, containing clothes and a wand, as Blake prepared to work his magic. Old Rep, momentarily tempted to smoke his pipe, remembered the hospital setting and refrained. His curiosity about Blake's methods piqued. Approaching the two bewildered witches, Blake assured them, "I'm here to assist in recovering your memories. You might feel sleepy, but upon waking, your memories will be restored." With a gentle tap of his wand on their foreheads, a faint purple light emanated, penetrating their minds. The witches promptly lost consciousness, and Nagini, acting swiftly, helped them back onto their beds. Old Rep, pipe still unlit, watched in anticipation, eager to witness the restoration process that had once reclaimed his own memories. In astonishment, Old Rep asked, Are we about to start? Do you need my help?" "Help? No, it's already done," Blake replied. "What? It's done?" Old Rep's pipe fell to the ground once more, breaking into two halves this time. With a flick of her wand, Blake repaired and returned the pipe to Old Rep's hand mid-flight. Holding his mended pipe, Old Rep was incredulous. "I merely blinked, and you've solved it?" "Because it wasn't complicated to begin with," Blake explained. The forgetting curse had merely silenced parts of their souls, All I needed to do was give their souls a gentle nudge, reigniting them. It's like troubleshooting a malfunctioning machine. Sometimes a restart is all it takes. Old Rep took a long drag on his pipe, only to realize it wasn't lit. Though I barely understand, it seems you've done something quite useful. He noticed one of the witches opening her eyes, this time clear and unconfused. My name is Agnes. I once drove out female ghosts in Bandon, and I thought Lockhart was a good man, she said, looking pale as she recounted how she was betrayed by Lockhart. Well, then you might need to improve your judgment of character, Blake remarked. Like Old Rep, Agnes retained her memories from her time at St. Mungo's after recovering. She was immediately grateful to Blake for the treatment. Recognizing her potential, Blake included her in his directory. Although her abilities weren't as extraordinary as Old Rep's, they were commendable, roughly on par with Snape's, especially her adeptness at concealing bats. If Old Rep was considered an SSR character, then Agnes would be an SR character. Soon after, another witch regained consciousness. She looked around, her eyes landing on a vase she had been arranging flowers in, and tears welled up. It feels so good to remember, she said. My name is Agatha. Since you've saved me, I'll do anything you ask of me from now on, she pledged, surprising Blake with her immediate loyalty. Ding! Followers who voluntarily pledge allegiance to the host have been detected. Will the host include them? The system's prompt sounded belatedly. Observing the determined glint in Agatha's eyes, Blake was intrigued. What did you do before? He asked, sensing she was no ordinary witch. I'm a bounty hunter, Agatha revealed. I accept commissions and collect bounties. I had just taken down a notorious dominatrix when Lockhart deceived me with his words. Blake's assessment of Agatha's attributes was impressive, nearly matching Old Rep's. Another SSR level, he thought, impressed by her bravery, cunning, and strength. Agatha had managed to infiltrate a dominatrix's stronghold, eliminate the leader, and escape unscathed, a testament to her formidable abilities. Blake sighed, realizing the world was full of powerful wizards beyond those he knew. Old Rep's prowess alone rivaled Dumbledore's, and Blake wondered if he could stand against Grindelwald. Then, how were you attacked? Blake inquired, eager to understand more about Agatha's past and the dangers they had faced. By Lockhart? Agatha's grip tightened, and the vase she held shattered into pieces. That despicable man. After hearing my story, he claimed he was a writer, she seethed, her teeth clenched in anger. He offered me 100 gold galleons for a commission. She paused, her fury barely contained. He wanted me to teach him how to duel. During the demonstration, I was supposed to be hit by a disarming curse, but instead, he hit me with an obliviate curse. Blake looked at Agatha, his eyes filled with sympathy. Participating in a demonstration duel was a common practice, where the instructor would personally engage in combat, allowing their student to cast spells on them. This was how he had taught Hermione the disarming spell, even enduring the effects of her spells himself. Such moments left one incredibly vulnerable, making Lockhart's betrayal all the more insidious. Changing the spell at the last moment was a deceitful move, catching the victim off guard when they least expected it. Most would never anticipate such treachery, making the use of an obliviate curse over something as lethal as the killing curse seem even more underhanded. You must know where Lockhart is, right? Agatha's voice broke through Blake's thoughts, her tone urgent. Of course I do, he replied. Can you tell me? I want to crush his balls with my own hands. Her words were laced with a venomous determination, a clear testament to the depth of her anger and the lengths she was willing to go for retribution. Chapter 285, A Visit with Healing Intentions. Blake knew he couldn't allow Agatha to confront Lockhart just yet, not at this moment. Haha, to think someone like him could actually be a professor? He mused. Okay, since you have a plan, I'll follow your lead, Agatha responded with a shrug. I don't mind. I've recovered now anyway. Whether we confront him sooner or later doesn't matter to me. She held the vase in her hand, now shattered into pieces, with an eerily calm expression. Blake couldn't help but be a little taken aback by her strength. He had a feeling that even without using magic, she was still a formidable force. Don't worry, it won't be long, Blake reassured her, taking 2 packages from Nagini and handing them over. Now that you're fine, let's get out of here. Agatha and Agnes accepted the packages, which contained not only a brand new set of clothes, but also a money bag filled with gold galleons and a magic wand. As Agatha picked up the wand, she felt a warmth emanating from it. "What a wand!" she exclaimed. Agnes, too, looked at her wand with a look of longing. It had been so long since they had last held a wand. How could they have forgotten the allure of magic? While Agatha and Agnes changed clothes in a cubicle, Blake and Old Rip revisited the Longbottom's bra compartment. Blake carefully examined the two, prompting Old Rip's curiosity. "Do you know them?" "I don't personally know them, but I've heard their story," Blake explained. "They were heroes who fought against Voldemort. Unfortunately, after his fall, the remaining Death Eaters captured them and subjected them to the Cruciatus Curse, hoping to learn Voldemort's whereabouts. The prolonged torture left them with permanent damage." Old Rip fell silent, the weight of the story settling in. "It's difficult to hear such things at my age, but your willingness to call Voldemort by his name, I respect that. It's better than how most people react." Blake, continuing his examination, shared his thoughts. "I'm not comfortable giving him the satisfaction of fearing his name. Voldemort is just a moniker he chose to escape his real identity. If I ever met him, I'd call him Tom." Old Rip smiled at this. "That's what I admire about you. We shouldn't give our enemies the satisfaction, not even in the form of a title." After a moment of reflection, Old Rip steered the conversation back to the Longbottoms. "So, is there a way to heal them? You mentioned something about a restart." Blake sighed, putting away his wand. "A restart wouldn't help them. Their souls have been damaged, almost mutilated, but there must be a way. Their physical injuries have long since healed, which means the issue lies with their souls." He pondered the situation, likening it to cases of psychosis he'd heard about in his previous life, where the soul was incomplete despite the brain being healed. "Perhaps I can find a way to replenish their souls. I'll need to research this further." Blake considered revisiting his studies on Horcruxes, given Voldemort's ability to maintain a semblance of sanity despite his fragmented soul. This exploration could hold the key to understanding and healing the Longbottoms. At that moment, Blake realized the potential value of the diary Horcrux. Unlike other Horcruxes, the diary contained a remnant of Voldemort's soul that was almost complete, making it a unique and potentially invaluable resource in his quest to find a cure. Emerging from a bronze treasure chest, the diary's research value towered above that of other Horcruxes. At that moment, Agnes and Agatha, having followed Nagini, emerged as well. They had shed their hospital gowns for fresh wizard robes. "Is it really okay for us to just leave like this?" Agnes inquired, seeking confirmation. "You were never prisoners in Azkaban, merely patients. Now that you're cured, there's nothing to stop you from leaving. You simply need to complete the discharge procedures," Blake explained, his tone reassuring. "Believe me, your therapist is likely more thrilled than anyone to see you recovered." "Right." Blake then produced another money bag from his pocket. "Should they request payment for your medical expenses, the gold galleons inside should suffice." Agatha, puzzled, waved her hand. "Didn't you just give us one?" Indeed, the package Blake had previously handed them contained not only clothes and wands, but also a money bag brimming with 1,000 gold galleons, a fortune for Agatha and Agnes. The amount should more than cover their treatment fees. Blake shook his head, clarifying, "That's for your future resettlement. The medical expenses will be covered by this." The sisters exchanged surprised glances. For someone as young as Blake to dispense such a sum so casually was astonishing. "Take it," Old Lep interjected, returning his pipe to his belt with a calm demeanor. "Blake is exceptionally capable." Old Lep's endorsement was clear. Blake, being extraordinarily capable, operated on a different level from most. To him, such financial gestures were trivial. Old Lep had witnessed Blake's prowess firsthand through the homemade potion he had crafted, a concoction potent enough to amass a lifetime of wealth. Furthermore, Blake's apparent close ties with Dumbledore hinted at even greater resources. The Dumbledore family is not without means. "Thank you," Agatha said, accepting the money bag with genuine gratitude. "You needn't thank us if you're one of our own." Blake responded with a wave of his hand, his pride evident. "Once you're in our circle, you're fully one of us." Blake was never one to skimp on those he considered allies, confident in their potential to justify his investment. Subsequently, Blake tasked Nagini with assisting Agnes and Agatha through their discharge procedures. Meanwhile, he and Old Lep approached an individual known as Mr. Teapot. Initially, Mr. Teapot hadn't been part of Blake's plan, but a recollection that he had once served in the Department of Mysteries as a silent person piqued Blake's interest. Such individuals, known for their top-secret missions and either formidable power or exceptional research capabilities, intrigued Blake immensely. Blake mused on the fine line between genius and madness, convinced that Mr. Teapot must have been a genius before his descent into madness. Regardless, Blake saw his condition as a minor obstacle. Thus, Blake decided to take a chance on what he termed a blind box before departing. "Old Lep, let's make a wager," Blake proposed. "On what?" Old Lep inquired, his gaze fixed on Mr. Teapot, who was perched awkwardly on a coffee table. "I bet this man was a talent before his affliction," Blake asserted confidently. Old Lep, after a moment's silence, offered his perspective. "With all due respect, I believe he remains a talent even now." Neurosis, as they both knew, was a challenging condition to overcome, but insanity induced by a curse was another matter entirely, a matter easily remedied with a dose of Blake's specially brewed, curse-breaking potion. Before commencing treatment, Blake extracted a peculiar small box and began interacting with Mr. Teapot, prompting Old Lep's curiosity. "What are you doing?" Old Lep couldn't help but ask. "Taking a picture," Blake replied, his actions shrouded in mystery, yet driven by a clear purpose, to unlock the potential he believed still resided within Mr. Teapot. Blake regarded the man huddled in bed before him with a smile. The man, previously referred to as the Teapot Man due to his peculiar condition, was now properly known as Broderick Border. Blake's ability to cure Broderick's unique ailment had not only earned him a golden treasure chest from the system, but also proved Broderick's potential as a talent. With the reality eyes activated, Blake observed the white light above Broderick's head gradually shifting towards a golden hue, a clear indicator of his newfound status. "Ahem, I am deeply grateful for your help in curing me, but I would do anything if you could erase that video," Broderick pleaded. His voice laced with desperation. The system chimed in at that moment, detecting Broderick's willingness to follow Blake. "Ding! Followers who voluntarily follow the host have been detected. Will the host include them?" Blake, with a mischievous grin, responded. "Unfortunately, that's not possible. You see, that video holds significant research value." Broderick, confused and slightly agitated, pressed, "What research value could it possibly have?" "It's crucial for studying abnormal conditions at St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries," Blake explained, trying to maintain a serious demeanor. Broderick, who had just recovered from his condition, couldn't bear to look at the video of his past self. The mere glimpse threatened to unravel his newly regained sanity. Blake, however, was only teasing him. Now that Broderick was considered one of their own, he was destined to become an invaluable assistant in Blake's future experiments, especially those fraught with danger. Therese Pye, a staff member at St. Mungo's, was puzzled by the group standing before her. Among them were several patients from the permanent wards. "Are you certain you wish to proceed with their discharge?" she inquired, skepticism evident in her tone. "Absolutely, Miss Pye," Blake assured her politely. "They've received the best care here at St. Mungo's, but they no longer require it. Their conditions have been cured." Therese was taken aback. "Cured? What do you mean by cured?" At that moment, it dawned on her. The patients behind Blake, though still a bit pale, had a newfound clarity in their eyes, a clear sign of their recovery. "But how did they suddenly recover?" Therese asked, her curiosity piqued. "I discovered a treatment for their conditions and applied it successfully," Blake explained. "The Longbottom's case is more complex, but I'm confident I'll find a solution soon." Therese was astounded. The young man before her had not only cured several long-term patients, but also promised to cure the remaining ones. This was unprecedented in the history of St. Mungo's. Meanwhile, Blake's system was busy tallying up the rewards. Therese's astonishment and subsequent belief in his abilities had earned him a series of treasure chests, culminating in a gold one. Blake was pleasantly surprised by her reaction. It was unusual for someone to take his claims at face value, especially given his youth. He wondered what made Therese, a trainee therapist, so different from the others who usually met his declarations with skepticism. Could she truly believe everything he said? Even if he was speaking the truth, her reaction seemed excessively dramatic. Please, give me a moment. I need to consult our dean, Tris managed to say after a long pause, before turning and hurrying away, leaving Blake and the others standing there, bewildered. Dean Bohan slumped into his chair, overwhelmed by a tumult of emotions. As the current head of St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries, he should have been overjoyed to witness a patient's recovery. St. Mungo's had dedicated years to treating those with magical ailments, and today a young man had achieved what seemed impossible. He had personally verified that the patients in the permanent ward were indeed fully healed. This miraculous recovery should have been a cause for celebration. Yet, Dean Bohan found himself grappling with a sense of defeat. The thought that decades of his hard work could be overshadowed by the achievements of a young man in just a few years was disheartening. Moreover, since his ancestor, Mungo Bohan, founded the hospital, such a groundbreaking event had never occurred. For the first time in decades, Dean Bohan voiced his frustrations in front of the portrait of Mungo Bohan, recounting the day's events. "Idiot, shouldn't your focus be on how that young man managed to heal the patients?" the portrait of Mungo Bohan chided. "Perhaps he has discovered a new treatment method that we have yet to understand. Instead of sulking in your office, you should be seeking his advice on this innovative approach. Do you realize how many lives could be saved with this new technique? This discovery could be monumental not just for St. Mungo's, but for the entire wizarding world. If possible, you should even offer him a position as a lead therapist at St. Mungo's, with a salary and benefits package that matches his contributions." The wisdom of the hospital's founder, even in portrait form, was far more insightful than that of his descendant. Dean Bohan was taken aback by the realization. "You're right. How could I have lost sight of St. Mungo's founding mission?" he exclaimed, suddenly energized. He rushed out of his office, determined to make amends. However, by the time he returned to the ground floor, Blake and his companions had already departed. Dean Bohan was filled with regret. Then, as if struck by a sudden thought, he dashed back towards his office with renewed purpose. Chapter 286, An Unexpected Request for Healing Skills. Dean Bohan, upon receiving a special request from Professor Dumbledore, was initially puzzled. Dumbledore had instructed him to allow a young man to visit the 5th floor of the Curse Injury Department at St. Mungo's Hospital without any disturbances. At first, Bohan found the request odd. After all, visits could be made at any time. Why the need for such secrecy? However, it soon dawned on him. Dumbledore must have known that this young man intended to treat the patients there. To prevent any potential misunderstandings among the hospital's therapists, Dumbledore wanted to ensure the young man could work in peace. Realizing the significance of this, Bohan concluded that finding Dumbledore would lead him to the boy, and locating Dumbledore wouldn't be difficult. Initially considering writing a letter, Bohan quickly dismissed the idea, unwilling to wait even a moment longer. He decided to visit Hogwarts directly to seek out Dumbledore. Meanwhile, Blake, the subject of Bohan's urgent search, was unaware of the dean's intentions. After guiding his group out of St. Mungo's, Blake used a dimension gate to transport them directly to a secluded corner of Diagon Alley. He advised those with families to return home and provided funds for the others to find accommodations. "This is Diagon Alley. If you need anything, you can buy it here," Blake told them. When asked about his plans, Blake revealed his intention to continue his journey, showing a parchment with information on various victims, some names already marked off. Old Rep expressed a desire to accompany Blake, but Blake insisted it was better for the group to find a place to stay and recover. "Take good care of yourselves, and get back into shape. Nagini and I will go together," Blake said. As the conversation unfolded, it became clear that except for Blake and Nagini, everyone else was alone, without families or homes to return to. Blake offered words of comfort, suggesting they could form their own community. Agatha proposed that Old Rep, being the strongest, should accompany Blake for protection. She also suggested they pool their resources to buy materials and build a house together, a task not difficult for wizards, especially with the use of a Muggle expelling curse to avoid detection. The group agreed to this plan. Building their own house would save them from paying rent and provide a sense of belonging. With the decision made, Blake, Nagini, and Old Rep used the dimensional door to leave Diagon Alley, embarking on the next phase of their journey. This chapter not only highlights the strong sense of community among Blake and his companions, but also sets the stage for an intriguing encounter with Dean Bohan, who seeks out Dumbledore in hopes of finding Blake. The reasons behind Bohan's urgent need to meet Blake remain to be seen, adding an element of suspense to the narrative. At the edge of the closed dimensional door, Bode's eyes sparkled with curiosity. Will he teach us this kind of magic in the future? I've never encountered such magic before. Bode, once known as the Silent Man within the Department of Mysteries, dedicated his career to unraveling the mysteries of magical and inexplicable powers. The magic wielded by Blake seemed to fall squarely into this category of unexplainable phenomena. If he offers to teach, I'll learn. If not, I won't press him, Agatha stated succinctly. I'm just expressing my curiosity, Bode replied, a hint of frustration in his voice. His nature as a researcher made him inherently drawn to the unknown and novel. Meanwhile, Blake continued on his journey, leaving Bode and Agatha behind to ponder the possibilities. Elsewhere, Dean Bohan had just arrived at Hogwarts. He emerged from Professor McGonagall's makeshift fireplace, stepping into the office covered in a layer of ash. Dean Bohan, Dumbledore greeted, rising to his feet and extending a hand towards him from across the room. Despite the age difference, Dumbledore held Dean Bohan in high regard, acknowledging his significant contributions to the cause of justice during the tumultuous years of the Wizarding War through his work at St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. Professor Dumbledore, they shook hands firmly. I heard you've come in person. Is something amiss? Dumbledore inquired, leading Dean Bohan to the newly established reception area of the headmaster's office, a space suggested by Blake, complete with a window added specifically for this purpose. Nothing urgent, Albus. I'm here to seek someone out, Dean Bohan explained, settling into his seat. Who might that be? Blake Green. Dumbledore paused, a flicker of thought crossing his face at the mention of Blake. I mentioned the other day he might visit Sango to see some patients. Did he go? Dean Bohan sighed, nodding. Yes, he went. But it's not just a simple visit. Dumbledore's expression grew concerned. What happened? It's peculiar, Albus. Not only did he visit the patients, but he also managed to cure most of them in the permanent ward on the 5th floor and processed their discharge paperwork. Dumbledore, deep in thought, interlocked his fingers. Most of them? What about Mr. and Mrs. Longbottom? Except for the Longbottoms, he cured all the other patients. Dumbledore's gaze dimmed slightly. I see. So he couldn't heal Frank and Alice. Dean Bohan looked at Dumbledore, surprised by his lack of astonishment. Aren't you shocked at all? Could it be that? Dumbledore sighed. I was aware of the boy's unique abilities. I suspected he might be capable of treating some of the more challenging cases, so I had hoped he would attempt it. Dean Bohan leaned forward, his expression serious. Then I've come to the right place. I'm here to inquire about his healing techniques. Dumbledore looked at Dean Bohan, visibly taken aback. You, Europe's finest therapist, are seeking healing advice from him. Dean Bohan frowned slightly. The finest therapist? Albus, that feels like mockery. If I were truly the best, why have those patients languished on the 5th floor for years without improvement? I'm here in earnest to seek guidance. Blake is indeed a student here at Hogwarts, Dumbledore confirmed. However, he's currently away, attending to some matters. Impossible. Didn't he say he would return to study the Longbottoms case further? Dumbledore's eyes suddenly sparkled with realization. You mean to say, it's not that he can't? Dean Bohan was visibly frustrated about missing Blake once more, his emotions akin to the anticipation and impatience one feels waiting for the next episode of a gripping TV series. I just don't understand, he lamented. If Blake intends to research a cure for the Longbottoms, why does he keep leaving? It's like he's always just out of reach. That's precisely it, Dumbledore explained with a patient tone. The PI therapist who took on their case mentioned that while the situation is complex, it's not beyond hope. Blake needs to conduct further research, but he believes a cure is possible. Dean Bohan's frustration was palpable. But if he's so close to finding a cure, one that's so miraculous it allows patients to leave the hospital on the same day they're treated, why go elsewhere? I rushed here thinking he had returned. Dumbledore, ever the voice of calm, responded thoughtfully. Given Blake's success in treating the patients on the 5th floor so swiftly, I believe he'll return soon. He's out there treating others, which is why he's been away. Dean Bohan's surprise quickly turned to anger. That's outrageous. Such a person deserves to be locked up in Azkaban. He picked up a cup, intending to throw it in his anger, but upon realizing it wasn't his, he reluctantly set it back down. Despite his outburst, he glanced at Dumbledore, acknowledging, I suppose you all have your reasons. Resigned, he added, I'll head back then, but please let me know the moment Blake returns. I want to be here. Dumbledore offered a reassuring smile. No need to worry. When he says he'll kill you're the Longbottoms, he means it, and when he does return to do so, I'll make sure you're with him. Dean Bohan's mix of anxiety and hope reflected the complexity of their situation. Despite his initial outburst, his commitment to seeing the Longbottoms cured underscored a deep-seated concern for their well-being, a sentiment Dumbledore clearly shared. Chapter 287, The Unexpected Expense in Nocturne Alley. Bodhi, could you move a bit further to the left? Agatha instructed, her voice laced with a hint of impatience. Please, your left, not mine, she corrected, but it was too late. A wooden beam fell squarely onto a house that was still under repairs. Exhausted, Bode slumped to the ground, setting his wand aside to take large gulps of water from his bottle. Agatha observed his slender arms and legs with a critical eye. I've heard tales of some very strong individuals within the Ministry of Magic, and among the silent people, there are wizards of considerable power, she mused aloud. Bode, wiping sweat from his brow, responded with a weary wave of his hand. I know what you're implying, Agatha, but I'm merely a researcher. Do you expect me to excel in both scholarly pursuits and combat? Agatha licked her slightly dry lips, a hint of disappointment in her tone. It's a shame, really. I was hoping to find a worthy sparring partner. Bode shivered at the thought. Are all bounty hunters as combative as you? I'm at my limit, and Agnes is no match for you. Perhaps you could challenge old Lep, he suggested weakly. Agatha scoffed. He's out with Blake. Otherwise, I would have tested my skills against him. It's been years since I've used magic in combat, and I feel my abilities have dulled. With a vigorous wave of her wand, a pile of thick, heavy wooden beams lifted into the air and settled onto their designated spots with astonishing precision. Bode watched in awe, realizing the immense magical power and skill required for such a feat. Clearly, Agatha's combat skills were far from rusty. Yet, Bode couldn't help but feel slighted. So you expect me to labor over tasks you could accomplish in seconds? Agatha replied sternly. I believe you need the exercise. Exercise? I was merely using magic, Bode protested, though he couldn't deny his exhaustion from the minimal magical exertion. Before he could further argue, a circle of sparks appeared before them, signaling Blake's return. Bode watched with eager eyes, curious about the magic at work. As the dimensional gate opened, a snowstorm from the other side swept through, leaving snowflakes scattered on the ground. Blake emerged, shaking snow from his robes. I hadn't expected Tibet to be so cold, Blake remarked, brushing off the snow. Old Rep, rubbing his hands together for warmth, replied, It's winter there, Blake. Blake then produced a plate of peculiar sunflowers, their warm glow providing a comforting heat. What a remarkable place, Agatha, he exclaimed, taking in their surroundings. Bode, however, was less impressed. The scenery might be nice, but we're on a mountain. Aside from raiders, who else would choose such a location? It's hardly convenient for shopping. Agatha shot him a sideways glance. What do you know? It's safe here, surrounded by cliffs on all sides. Apart from flying, it's nearly impossible for anyone to reach us. Besides, I've concealed the entire mountain with magic today. Bode muttered under his breath about the inconvenience, to which Agatha retorted, Inconvenient? You're a wizard. Surely you're not telling me you can't apparate. If not, I've prepared a broom for you. Perhaps Agatha's disdain for weakness explained her harshness towards Bode, who lacked notable magical prowess. Sitting aside, Bodhi felt wronged. I am a researcher. Blake, ever the peacemaker, intervened. Agatha, Bode excels in research. It's understandable if he's not adept at certain spells. Don't worry, I have plans to make this place more accessible. The location Agatha selected was atop a mountain, a vast plateau as expansive as a football field, giving the impression that the peak had been sliced in half. Encircled by sheer cliffs on all sides, access seemed impossible for muggles, save for a helicopter ride, while wizards could only reach it by apparating or broom flight. Agatha had concealed the entire mountain, making it invisible to outsiders, a testament to her formidable Blake expressed his astonishment. I had no idea there were mountains this high in the UK. Agatha explained. It wasn't originally this tall, but my family, my father and others have been enchanting this mountain for years. He preferred living at higher altitudes, so the mountain grew taller over time. Blake was momentarily speechless, marveling at the extent of her family's magical prowess. What about your family? Blake inquired, noticing a shadow pass over Agatha's face. Oh, sorry, he quickly apologized upon seeing her reaction. It's all right. He did leave me this magnificent place, Agatha said, regaining her composure. Blake, why don't you introduce the newcomers? Agatha's eyes sparkled with a fighting spirit as she glanced at the individuals behind Blake. Of course, Blake responded. He had left with 3 companions and returned with 4 additional ones. He introduced a middle-aged man with brown hair and a sallow complexion who bore a stern and somber expression. This is Ackerman Allen, originally the protagonist of Walking with the Ghouls. Allen greeted them weakly, but Agatha's interest was piqued, sensing his strength surpassed even Agnes's. Next, Blake introduced Churchwright, a short, plump man with a perpetual smile that was infectious. He was meant to be the hero of Walking with Trolls. Agatha's excitement grew. She knew appearances could be deceiving, and Church's harmless demeanor likely hid a complex character. Blake then presented Winsty, a slender figure in a cloak, known from Voyage with the Vampire. Removing her cloak, she revealed a pale, youthful face, exuding an aura of distance. Agatha and Agnes were taken aback by her appearance, noting how Allen and Church instinctively kept their distance. Agnes inquired about Winsty's age during Gilderoy Lockhart's attack, to which Winsty calmly revealed she was the vampire's daughter in the story, hinting at a dark turn of events with Lockhart. Blake clarified that Winsty encountered Lockhart shortly after the incident described in the book. Lastly, Blake introduced Barry, the main character from A Year with the Tibetan Snowman. Barry's story, he revealed with hesitation, was fabricated. The snowman was merely a creation of his imagination. Each introduction peeled back layers of intriguing backstories and hinted at the complex dynamics within this unique group, all seeking refuge or purpose atop Agatha's hidden mountain. Using magic. At that time, I had been hiding in Tibet for a long time and was feeling incredibly lonely, Barry recounted, a hint of sadness in his voice. But Lockhart believed my story. I never expected him to claim it as his own. He sighed, a mix of resignation and bitterness in his tone. In a way, I suppose it's fine. I considered him a friend, so the fact that he took my story doesn't bother me much. What truly hurts is that he used the memory charm on me. Why would he harm me? I've been secluded in Tibet, living a solitary life. Why does misfortune still find me? Anger flickered in Barry's eyes as he waved his wand, conjuring a visible layer of water on the ground. After the group had gotten to know each other better, Blake turned to Old Rep and asked, Old Rep, would you accompany me once more? Of course, Old Rep replied, his excitement palpable. Where do you wish to go? To make our journey more convenient, I need to visit Nocturne Alley to purchase a few items, Blake explained, his eyes narrowing slightly. Understood. Old Rep was aware that Blake might encounter trouble in Nocturne Alley, and he felt it would be safer to accompany him. I'll just go and fetch some galleons, Blake mentioned, realizing that the money he had brought with him was nearly spent. Go back for money? Agatha interjected with a casual tone. Does one need money to shop in Nocturne Alley? Her question drew puzzled looks from everyone. What's the issue? Agatha asked, noticing their stares. I never bring money when I visit. The proprietors there are all crooks. Every time Begone. I've never paid for my purchases. They wouldn't dare challenge me, and if they ever thought to report me to the Aurors, I'd simply return the items. But would they dare? Agatha explained, her arms crossed confidently. Blake couldn't help but admire her audacity. You're incredible. It's not about being great, it's about them being cowards, Agatha clarified. So you don't need to retrieve your money. I'll just come with you. Old Rep shrugged in agreement. I have no objections. A few minutes later, they arrived in Nocturne Alley. Blake was dressed in a cloak, his face obscured by a scarf, a common sight in the alley. Agatha, on the other hand, made no effort to hide her identity, her gaze defiant as she surveyed the hurried passers-by. A smile played on her lips. Nocturne Alley, I, Agatha, have returned, she announced with gusto. Blake observed Agatha's high spirits, an idea forming in his mind. However, he decided to first test Agatha's capabilities. The bell above the door of Borgin & Burke's tinkled as they entered. The shopkeeper, Borgin, looked up with a welcoming smile. However, his expression froze upon recognizing Agatha. Agatha, you're not, he stammered, unable to finish his sentence. Do you mean to ask why I, of all people, am here? Agatha finished for him, her smile widening. Oh, no, Borgin hastily corrected, his voice trembling. Clearly, Agatha's previous visits had left a lasting impression on him. Why would I think that? It's just, you haven't visited in a while, so I was momentarily surprised. I'm curious. What brings you here today? He asked, eyeing Agatha warily, fearful she might cause chaos again. His store had been rebuilt since her last visit, after all. Agatha glanced at Blake, unsure of his intentions. Blake pointed to an oddly shaped cabinet in the store. I want this cabinet, he stated. Of course, you have excellent taste, Borgin exclaimed, eager to please. This cabinet is uniquely crafted and reasonably priced. It only costs. His voice trailed off as he caught Agatha's teasing gaze. Well, I enjoy making friends. Since this is your first visit, I'll give you the cabinet as a gift, Borgin offered, though it was clear the decision pained him. Chapter 288, The Unexpected Champion. The vanishing cabinet was the primary reason for Blake's visit to Borgin and Burke's. This magical artifact is quite fascinating, typically coming in pairs. By placing two vanishing cabinets in different locations, one can create a portal effect, allowing for the instant transfer of objects or even people between the 2 points. Initially, Nicholas Flamel had given Blake a small vanishing cabinet for Christmas to facilitate the swift exchange of experimental findings and products. The counterpart was situated in Flamel's residence, making the transfer of materials between them exceedingly convenient. The vanishing cabinet in Borgin and Burke's, however, was of a larger variety, capable of transporting people between two distinct locations. Blake was aware of its counterpart hidden within Hogwarts' Room of Requirement. This particular cabinet was meant to have been destroyed by Peeves during Halloween, but due to Blake's intervention in saving Harry and subsequently detaining Peeves, the cabinet remained intact. By strategically placing one cabinet in Diagon Alley and the other in the Hilltop Settlement, Blake envisioned a seamless method of transportation, surpassing even the convenience of using a flu network. However, the use of the vanishing cabinet came with a caveat. One must be aware of the cabinet's counterpart location to avoid being trapped in an endless loop of teleportation. This predicament could only be resolved through apparition or if someone were to open the cabinet's door from the outside. Blake was initially prepared for a tough negotiation with Borgin, the notorious profiteer, to secure a reasonable price for the cabinet. To his surprise, Agatha's mere presence swayed the situation to their favor, resulting in the cabinet being gifted to them at no cost. Now you've offered this to us. Refusing it would be an insult to your generosity, Blake remarked, masking his delight with a tone of solemnity. And I've always valued your goodwill. Agatha, feigning a gracious acceptance, patted Borgin's shoulder, her enthusiasm barely concealing her triumph. Borgin, though outwardly smiling, was inwardly lamenting the loss of such a valuable magical artifact. Despite not knowing the location of its counterpart, the cabinet's rarity and utility could have easily fetched thousands of galleons. Now, it was a gift. With a heavy heart, Borgin prepared the cabinet for transport, meticulously cleaning it with a towel, eager to rid himself of Agatha's imposing presence. Gosh, this cabinet is quite large, Agatha observed, feigning surprise. It didn't seem so big from afar. How shall we transport it? Borgin, could you arrange delivery to our doorstep? Blake couldn't help but admire Agatha's cunning, realizing he had much to learn. Borgin's face drained of color, the implications of Agatha's request dawning on him. Not only had he lost a valuable vanishing cabinet, but he was now expected to provide a traceless expanded suitcase for its transport, further adding to his losses. To enchant a disappearing cabinet with a charm, and not think that suitcases enhanced with the seamless stretch charm come cheap, is a mistake. Such items are strictly regulated by the Ministry of Magic, and using the invisible stretching charm privately is actually illegal. Consequently, these suitcases are in high demand and short supply. A suitcase offering ample space and a stable spell typically costs around 500 gold galleons. Therefore, the idea of placing a disappearing cabinet valued at 1,000 gold galleons atop a box worth 500 gold galleons made Bach feel faint, a sensation so intense he nearly spat out blood. However, to prevent any further disturbances or potential damage to other items in his store by this unpredictable woman, Bach reluctantly retrieved a brand new suitcase from behind the counter. Just use this seamless stretch spell box, Bach suggested, trying to maintain his composure. The space within is more than sufficient. It could even accommodate a dragon. Simply move the cabinet inside. Then, Agatha said, smiling at Bach, I'll take it as a gift as well. Fantastic. To think you wouldn't consider me a friend after all these years of absence, Agatha exclaimed, clapping Bach on the shoulder, her tone jovial, yet edged with an unspoken threat, evident from the wand conspicuously tucked in her waistband. Bach managed a strained smile, thinking to himself that her gestures of friendship would be more believable without the constant display of her wand. Agatha turned to Blake, her smile broadening. See, I told you he's a friend, right? Feel free to take whatever you like. Bach is a good friend and wouldn't dream of charging us galleons, she declared, much to Bach's dismay. The thought of being exploited under the guise of friendship was too much for him, especially when there were plenty of other shops in Nocturne Alley they could patronize. No, this disappearing cabinet is sufficient, Blake's voice, altered by magic, emanated from beneath his cloak. All right, as you wish, Agatha replied, releasing Bach from her grip. Instantly, Bach felt a weight lift from his shoulders, along with the ominous sensation that his life was hanging by a thread. Bach was left to ponder in despair. Why had this formidable and seemingly unhinged woman returned? And why did she seem even more powerful than before? Unbeknownst to him, Blake's recovery of his memories had also restored all of Agatha's combat skills, which, under the influence of Blake's soul magic, had become even more potent. As Agatha and Blake respectfully exited Bojin Bach's store, Bach was left staring at the empty space where the disappearing cabinet once stood, his mind racing with questions. Agatha's deference to Blake was puzzling. It didn't seem like a romantic relationship, but rather one of master and servant. The realization that Agatha, a feared bounty hunter, had submitted to someone else was staggering. To Bach and the rest of Nocturne Alley, this indicated that Blake possessed power beyond their comprehension. With a heavy heart, Bach acknowledged that Agatha's visit, solely for the disappearing cabinet, meant that Nocturne Alley as a whole might suffer losses. But then, a mischievous grin spread across his face. If he was to face losses, he wouldn't be the only one. With a determined flick of his quill, he penned a message, grabbed the owl beside him, and sent it off into the night. Meanwhile, Blake, carrying the suitcase with the disappearing cabinet inside, walked alongside Agatha, their presence in Nocturne Alley causing a stir among those who recognized the formidable bounty hunter and her mysterious companion. Exiting Nocturne Alley and heading towards Diagon Alley, I had Agatha by my side. Today's objective had been achieved with surprising ease. To avoid detection, I had disguised my voice and appearance, making others perceive me as just a small, inconspicuous man. This precaution lessened my worry that Dumbledore might discover my ventures into Nocturne Alley. Blake, do you think it's wrong for us to treat Burke that way? Agatha broke the silence, her voice tinged with concern. She seemed to think I was upset about our actions. You must understand, none of the items in Burke's shop are acquired through honest means. If you knew the origins of his goods, you wouldn't feel the slightest bit of sympathy for him. I stopped and faced her, shaking my head to dispel her worries. I'm not angry, Agatha. I'm well aware of the nature of those people. The first time I ventured into Nocturne Alley, they tried to capture and harm me. How could I possibly feel guilty for standing up to such villains? That's a relief. I was worried, Agatha admitted, her voice softening. She had assumed that, being young, I might possess an idealistic sense of justice. However, she was pleasantly surprised to find that I was more accepting of the harsh realities of our world. Suddenly, Agatha's hand moved to the wand at her waist, her expression turning serious. It seems my absence from Nocturne Alley has made some forget who I am. The bustling noise of the alley had ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. The wizards around us had subtly encircled us, signaling trouble. This wasn't my first confrontation in Nocturne Alley, but the situation seemed far more dire than before. Previously, it was a small group that had targeted me. Now, it appeared the entire street was against us. Agatha, undaunted, drew her wand. Stand behind me, Blake. I'll handle this. Despite facing numerous wizards, Agatha's excitement was palpable. You seem pleased, I observed. Of course, it's been too long since I've had a good fight, she replied, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. I glanced at the 5 cracked rings on my fingers, feeling a twinge of regret. Sorry, Agatha, but I can't let you have this fight. I promise to make it up to you with a more satisfying battle in the future. For now, this one is mine. Agatha looked at me, surprise evident in her eyes. Blake, there are so many of them. Isn't that better? I replied with a grin. It means I don't have to hold back. They're all enemies, after all. With a confident smile, I drew my wand, only to notice the rings on my fingers shattering. The fragments turned to dust and scattered in the wind. Borrow me your wand, I requested, turning to Agatha. Without hesitation, she handed me her wand and drew a spare from her robes. Holding Agatha's wooden wand, I felt a surge of power. In the past, such a wand might have been destroyed by the force of my magic. But now, it remained intact, a testament to my increased control and power. After absorbing magical attributes from 8 individuals, my magical power had grown immensely, to the point where even the magic sealing rings could not contain it. Yet, alongside this increase in power, I discovered my ability to control it had also improved significantly. Previously, using magic felt like operating heavy machinery, clumsy and imprecise. Now, it was as if I was conducting a finely tuned orchestra, each spell a note played to perfection. Using an excavator screen, Blake found it to be accurate and fast. He had initially wanted to test his current abilities after returning, but he hadn't anticipated the cooperation of the individuals in Nocturne Alley, who once again surrounded him. Seizing this unexpected opportunity for a real-world test, Blake inadvertently took over the battle that was meant for Agatha. Come on, someone shouted suddenly. Then, as if on cue, everyone on the street who could find space launched their attacks on Blake and Agatha, who were cornered by a wall. To their astonishment, Blake summoned a tornado that not only blocked incoming spells, but also had the power to repel attackers with a strong gust of wind. Tornado sweeps away. Enhanced version, he whispered, a hint of excitement in his voice as he observed his wooden wand, which remained undamaged and cool to the touch. Despite the experienced dark wizards of Nocturne Alley being adept at dodging or countering spells, Blake's performance far exceeded expectations. A volley of spells was effortlessly deflected by the swirling tornado he controlled. The tornado's fury caused the shops on both sides of the alley to collapse, yet Blake and Agatha remained unharmed in the eye of the storm. The tornado's reach expanded dramatically, enveloping them completely. This was no ordinary whirlwind. It was a powerful force that Blake had summoned. Agatha, in shock, watched Blake manipulate the tornado with ease. I always thought that among us, the strongest fighters would be Old Rep or Alan. I never imagined it would be you, she murmured, her voice filled with awe and disbelief. Blake's mastery of the cyclone sweep was astonishing. With a flick of his wand, the tornado expanded exponentially, sending those who were too slow to react flying into the sky. The smarter ones quickly apparated away to safety. For a moment, the alley was lit up with colorful spells, creating a spectacle reminiscent of fireworks. Agatha, gripping her wand, idly, prepared to defend herself, but found herself speechless at the sight of Blake, who stood confidently in the eye of the storm, commanding the elements with a mere wave of his wand. Even for ordinary wizards, the power of such a spell would be limited, but Blake had turned it into a formidable force, demonstrating a level of magical prowess that left onlookers in awe. Chapter 289, Severus, Do You Want a Daughter? Bogenbach was lying by the door, his ear pressed against the cool wood, straining to catch the sounds from outside. The usual hustle and bustle of Nocturne Alley had fallen eerily silent. He knew this meant that the colleagues he had alerted were poised to strike. In a cunning move, Bach, the sixth sibling, had sent out letters hinting subtly at Agatha's diminished strength following her stint in St. Mungo's. The implication was clear. Agatha had been forced to submit to a new master due to her weakened state. As Bach had anticipated, this news had stirred the pot. The common consensus was that if Agatha, known for her formidable prowess, was bowing to someone, it could only mean one of two things. Either this person was more powerful than her, or something was amiss with Agatha herself. Given her notorious independence, the latter seemed more plausible, emboldening them to confront her. Bach's musings were abruptly shattered by a deafening whistling sound, followed by a cacophony of screams and the sound of buildings collapsing. The door in front of him vibrated violently, a testament to the chaos unfolding outside. Bach couldn't help but ruefully think that if Agatha had foreseen this, she might have fortified her store with additional protective spells during its last reconstruction. Looks like a renovation is due sooner than expected, he muttered to himself. The sudden return to silence outside filled Bach with a sense of foreboding. Swallowing hard, he cautiously cracked open the door for a peek. The sight that met his eyes caused him to drop an antique cup he was holding, which shattered on the floor. He quickly shut the door, his heart racing. This was beyond madness. Bach had expected Agatha to deal with the assailants as she usually did, perhaps even using the opportunity to extort them. But what he hadn't anticipated was that Agatha hadn't lifted a finger in her defense. Instead, it was the young man beside her who had taken action. The brief glimpse Bach had caught of the young man returning the wand to Agatha, and the look of utter respect and awe on her face, was something Bach would never have imagined possible. And the fate of the residents of Nocturne Alley who had dared to besiege them? Bach had seen them, all strung up from the rafters. A wave of regret washed over him. This incident was going to have far-reaching consequences. Meanwhile, Blake, feeling rejuvenated, handed Agatha's wand back to her. Reveling in his newfound control over his powers, he mused on how liberating it felt not to rely on a magical ring to contain his strength. "Boss, save me," Agatha said, addressing Blake as boss for the first time in her life. It was a title she bestowed with genuine conviction, having witnessed Blake's formidable curse work firsthand. Even at her strongest, she knew she was no match for him. "Agatha, just Blake will do," he corrected gently. "Okay, boss," she replied, undeterred. Blake surveyed the destruction his spell had wrought on the surrounding stores and the unfortunate souls he had ensnared. "Agatha, how about we make them all your underlings?" he suggested. Nocturne Alley was notorious for its unsavory inhabitants, but Blake had no intention of slaughtering them indiscriminately. After all, new villains would simply take their place. It made more sense to subjugate them, to have them serve as pawns when needed. These were individuals whose fates wouldn't weigh on Blake's conscience. Agatha eyed the dark wizards, now hanging on by a thread. "Leave it to me, boss. I'll ensure their loyalty," she declared confidently. "And about them daring to besiege us?" Blake added with a smile, hinting at retribution. "This account still needs to be settled," Agatha agreed, her eyes gleaming with resolve. "Take control of Nocturne Alley, then come to me," came the directive. "Okay, boss," was the eager reply. "By the way, they were all instigated by that old man, Bogenbach." "I understand. No wonder these guys were so quick to act. I'll deal with that old fool," Agatha declared, her anger palpable as she stormed off towards Bogenbach's location. Blake, meanwhile, spared a silent thought for Burke's impending doom before leaving the shadowy confines of Nocturne Alley behind. Stepping into the bustling Diagon Alley, Blake was greeted by the warmth of the sun on his face, contrasting sharply with the dark, eerie sounds emanating from Nocturne Alley. He couldn't help but reflect on the stark difference between the two places, likening it to stepping from hell into heaven. Blake had a plan. He intended to relocate the vanishing cabinet from Hogwarts to a hidden spot in Diagon Alley, thereby establishing a secret passage between the school and the alley. But of course, Blake didn't consider this theft. After all, he was a Hogwarts student, a scholar, no less. In his mind, this was merely borrowing, albeit with a rather indefinite return date. Moreover, he rationalized that by using the cabinet, he was actually preventing the tragedy that led to Dumbledore's death in the original story. In the long run, Professor Dumbledore will have to thank me, Blake mused, completely untroubled by his actions. Meanwhile, Snape was in his element, meticulously adding snake bile to a potion. His expertise as a potions master made failure almost impossible. However, his concentration was shattered by an unexpected explosion. Blake had appeared suddenly, causing Snape's carefully prepared potion to be ruined. Bang! The sound of the explosion echoed, followed by the system's notification of Snape's anger and Blake's acquisition of a silver treasure chest. Blake, somewhat embarrassed by the coincidence, thought about the potential of earning rewards every time Snape brewed a potion. "You need to give me an explanation, Blake," Snape demanded, his voice low and dangerous, his glare icy. Congratulations on breaking your record," Blake offered, attempting to lighten the mood. Snape, visibly seething, picked up a spoon, his grip so tight his knuckles whitened. "If your reasons aren't convincing, I'll feed this ruined potion to your niffler," he threatened. Blake, taken aback by Snape's cruelty, retorted, "Would Lily approve of such harshness?" "Go ahead, tell her if you can," Snape challenged, clearly not expecting Blake to take him up on it. Blake, realizing Snape's attempt to provoke him, sidestepped the bait. "What's really going on?" Snape demanded, reaching for a bottle only to find it empty, a reminder of the elixirs Blake had caused him to consume. "I'm planning to open a shop in Diagon Alley," Blake began, only to be cut off by Snape's immediate refusal, mistaking Blake's visit as a plea for financial assistance. "No, I didn't ask you for money," Blake retorted with frustration. It was perplexing to him how someone as accomplished as Snape, a master of potions, could be so miserly. Despite not having mentioned finances, Snape had hastily declared his lack of funds. Blake mused that such a quick denial often hinted at considerable wealth. "Oh, it's okay then," Snape responded with his usual calm demeanor. Blake, unable to resist teasing, prodded further. "So, Snape, you're not planning to marry then? Why the need to hoard your money?" "That's none of your business," Snape snapped back. "Let me guess, Lily asked you to look after Harry, so you're planning to leave all your wealth to him in the future, aren't you?" Blake speculated. Snape's expression soured. "Even if I had to throw my galleons into the river, I wouldn't leave a single one to Potter." "Oh, so you've moved past your feelings and are considering marriage and children," Blake continued, undeterred. "I will never fall in love again in my lifetime," Snape declared solemnly. "Then why the savings?" Blake pressed on. "Because I want to. Is that any of your concern?" Snape was visibly annoyed by Blake's prying. "Are you going to state your purpose or not?" Blake quickly waved his hand, attempting to steer the conversation back on track. "Ahem, I'm planning to open a shop. I thought it might interest you." He elaborated on his plan to establish a shop in Diagon Alley, cleverly concealing the vanishing cabinet behind it. This would not only generate income, but also disguise the cabinet's location, serving dual purposes. "And how do you propose we brush faces?" Snape inquired, puzzled by the term. "I'll provide the initial investment, and you'll open the store under your name. Then we'll hand it over to a person of my choosing to manage," Blake explained. "And why would I do this?" Snape asked, still confused. "Because it's going to be a potions shop. With your reputation as a potions master, it's bound to attract customers," Blake clarified. Snape was initially skeptical, considering the competition in Diagon Alley. However, recalling Blake's unique potion formulas, he realized the potential for success and reconsidered his stance. 50-50 split, Snape proposed, changing his tune. "Aren't you being a bit shameless?" Blake looked at him askance. "I'm embarrassed," Snape retorted, using the phrase with no hesitation. Blake laughed at Snape's audacity. You're just lending your name at the start, while we handle the formulas, costs, and production later on. And you want a 50% share? You're quite greedy. What does it have to do with you if I'm greedy? Snape shot back. Fine, you think you're the only potions master around? I'll just go to Slughorn. He was your teacher. He must be superior to you. Blake threatened, heading towards the door. It was a bluff, meant to provoke Snape into agreement. Potion masters are a proud lot, each believing in their own superiority. Snape, not immune to such pride, reluctantly agreed. Deal. He was content with a 10% share for merely lending his name, realizing he had pushed too far initially. Okay, it's settled, Blake said, turning back and producing a contract. He quickly amended it, adjusting the share percentage right before Snape's eyes. The contract initially stipulated a 37% share for Snape. Now it was changed to 19%. Snape's expression darkened at the sight. You little trickster, he muttered, realizing Blake's cunning. Yet there was a grudging respect in his tone, acknowledging Blake's shrewd negotiation skills. The audacity! How dare you make changes behind my back? Blake exclaimed, his voice dripping with indignation. Are you going to sign it or not? Snape retorted, his patience wearing thin. Fine, I'll sign. Blake huffed. But don't think you're pulling one over on me, you scoundrel. Sitting back and collecting money for doing nothing is an opportunity no sane person would pass up. After the agreement was signed, Blake's demeanor shifted dramatically. He grasped Snape's hand firmly, shaking it with a newfound sense of partnership. Excellent, this makes us partners, he declared, a sly grin spreading across his face. From now on, I'll address you as Severus. Snape's response was terse, his lips barely parting as he spat out 2 words filled with disdain. Get lost. Very well, Blake replied, unfazed by Snape's hostility. He turned to leave, but just as he reached the door, a thought struck him. Pausing, he looked back at Snape with a curious expression. Severus, have you ever considered wanting a daughter? P.S. Apologies for the delayed update. Has it always been this late? Well, that's all right. This revision corrects grammatical errors, improves sentence structure for better readability, enhances descriptive details for clearer imagery, ensures character actions and dialogues are consistent and logical, removes redundant phrases, clarifies ambiguous parts, and adjusts formatting for better presentation. Chapter 290, Dumbledore. Severus, you don't need to explain. I understand. Men. Just moments ago, while speculating about whether Snape was in the market for a wife, Blake had an epiphany regarding his biotechnology. Could it be possible to utilize this technology, perhaps incorporating some of Lily's genetic material, to create something extraordinary? The thought of presenting Snape with such a unique gift in exchange for a substantial reward crossed his mind. Given the saturation of his skills and the accumulation of vast amounts of materials, Blake found himself disinterested in opening any treasure chests below the gold level. His inventory now boasted several diamond-level chests, awaiting a grand opening alongside a potentially larger prize. What do you mean? Snape, turning to face Blake with a furrowed brow, asked. That's my daughter, Blake exclaimed with glee. A daughter with red hair and green eyes. You little scoundrel, have you been reading my mind again? Snape, picking up a spoon, threatened. Hey, just wait a minute. Blake, caught off guard, grabbed a chair to defend himself against Snape's spoon. I didn't use legilimency on you. Hiss, you just said that I read your mind? Doesn't that mean? Snape's pale face flushed with an unhealthy blush. Shut up! Oh, so you, an old boy, drank my magic potion and had such dreams. Blake's eyes sparkled as he realized. Ding! Extreme embarrassment and anger detected. Ding! Congratulations to the host for acquiring a golden treasure chest. Snape, now the butt of the joke, alternated between shades of red and white, mortified. Shut up, he snapped. Aha! I knew you were an old boy, weren't as straight-laced as you appeared, Blake teased. I didn't expect it. Professor Snape with his stern look could harbor such wild thoughts. Blake continued, adding insult to injury. Enraged, Snape drew his wand. Blake, seizing the moment, kicked the door of the underground office open and dashed out. Stop! I'll beat you to death! Snape, in hot pursuit, shouted. Spells whizzed past Blake, narrowly missing him and shearing off strands of his golden hair. Old man, are you serious? Blake taunted. The divine edge is shadowless, he shouted back, dodging another spell. Meanwhile, Cassandra, clutching her textbook, was navigating the crowd towards the potions classroom for her next lesson. However, before reaching the underground classroom, she was met with the sounds of chaos. She saw Professor Snape, lips pursed and wand in hand, chasing Blake, who had been absent for several days. A red spell narrowly missed Blake, who deftly sidestepped, causing it to strike a suit of armor instead. "Snape, that's enough! If you hit me again, I will retaliate," Blake warned. Undeterred, Snape continued his assault, though he refrained from using the same spell. His anger had somewhat subsided, but he was determined to teach Blake a lesson and exact a measure of revenge. As long as he could land a single hit, he would be satisfied. Whoosh! Another disarming spell flew from his wand. The onlookers, puzzled by the spectacle, watched as Blake grabbed a bewildered Malfoy and used him as a human shield. "Hey!" Malfoy exclaimed as he was propelled into the air, his face a picture of confusion. "Who am I? Where am I? Why am I flying?" Snape, infuriated by Blake's actions, pushed through the crowd and leaped over a small obstacle to continue the chase. Another spell was cast, but it missed its mark. "Professor Snape, what are you doing?" Professor McGonagall, arriving on the scene, looked at Snape with disbelief and concern. Holding her wand tightly, she eyed Snape with suspicion. The spell he had cast was deflected by her quick reflexes. Snape's lips twitched slightly upon noticing Professor McGonagall's stern gaze. This could be problematic, he thought, slowly sliding his wand back into his pocket. However, before he could offer an explanation, Blake emerged from behind Professor McGonagall. Professor Snape has lost his min. He's been chasing me and attacking me. Just look at him, glaring at me with such ferocity," Blake exclaimed, pointing an accusing finger at Snape. Hearing this, Snape felt his temper flare. While it wasn't unusual for students to irritate him, Blake had a unique talent for pushing his buttons. The patience he had honed during his time serving the Dark Lord seemed utterly ineffective against Blake's provocations. "Regardless, you're coming with me to the headmaster's office. This situation demands an explanation to Professor Dumbledore," Professor McGonagall declared, her voice tinged with anger. The idea of a teacher pursuing and attempting to strike a student was unprecedented in Hogwarts' long history. Snape took a deep breath, attempting to quell his rising anger, and holstered his wand. Professor McGonagall sighed in relief, seeing that he was willing to stand down. Given Snape's complex past, she had been genuinely concerned about his potential reaction. Turning to Blake, she noticed his expression of feigned regret. "What are you sorry for now?" she thought, quickly deducing that Blake must have provoked Snape once again, leading to this unacceptable behavior. "Don't you dare smile. Follow me," she scolded Blake, her frustration evident. The spectacle of a teacher and student in such a chase was damaging to Hogwarts' esteemed reputation. "Cassandra!" Blake heard his name called from a distance. He glanced back, offering her a reassuring blink before turning to follow Professor McGonagall to the headmaster's office. Dumbledore, faced with the duo, massaged his temples, feeling a headache coming on. "I expect a reasonable explanation from both of you," he said, though his gaze lingered on Blake. Dumbledore was well aware of Snape's temperament and knew that Blake must have provoked him to warrant such a reaction. Feeling Dumbledore's scrutinizing gaze, Blake shifted uncomfortably. "Professor, you know I always follow the rules. I didn't even retaliate when he chased me through 3 corridors," Blake protested, trying to paint himself as the victim. "That doesn't mean you're innocent, Blake," Dumbledore replied calmly. "What exactly did you do to provoke Severus to such an extent?" Blake glanced at Snape, noticing a smug look in his eyes, as if Snape was pleased to see him in trouble. Determined not to let Snape have the last laugh, Blake hesitated before speaking. "Professor Snape, may I really disclose the incident?" Snape's face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment. Before Blake could elaborate, Snape interrupted with a series of exaggerated coughs. "Actually, it's not what you might think," Snape managed to say, his voice strained. The room fell into an uneasy silence as Dumbledore awaited an explanation, his gaze shifting between the two, ready to unravel the truth behind this unusual confrontation. Severus Snape was desperate to see Blake's confidence wane, but the thought of Blake revealing his secret made Snape feel as if he couldn't bear to remain at Hogwarts, or even on Earth for that matter. "Then please, enlighten us. What exactly were you doing just now? Professor McGonagall demanded, her tone stern. Her lips were pursed tightly, a clear indicator to those familiar with her that she was significantly irritated. Surely, you're not going to claim that what you were doing was merely preparing for a duel, are you? That's exactly it, Professor. You know me. I'm the president of the dueling club, Blake exclaimed with a hint of pride. This time, I sought out Professor Snape to serve as the instructor for the dueling club's latest session. He paused, searching for his next words. And then, Professor Snape decided to test my dueling skills. Dumbledore observed Blake with a speechless expression. The boy was clearly fabricating a story, evident from his hesitant delivery. It was obvious to anyone, especially to a visibly annoyed Minerva. That's not what you initially claimed, Blake, Dumbledore interjected, his tone laced with skepticism. Dumbledore. Snape, Egan, a twitch at the corner of his mouth betraying his frustration. Dumbledore's sudden halt and the look he gave Snape made it clear he had surmised something else entirely. Perhaps thinking Blake had stumbled upon some compromising secret about Snape. Dumbledore's gaze turned speculative, pondering what Blake could have possibly witnessed. It was challenging for Snape to have remained single for so many years, and Dumbledore couldn't help but wonder if that had something to do with it. Misinterpreting the situation could lead to misunderstandings, especially among students. Snape, noticing Dumbledore's speculative look, felt his face flush with embarrassment. "Things are not what you think," he managed to say, attempting to clarify the misunderstanding. "I understand," Dumbledore reassured, turning to Professor McGonagall. "Minerva, it's all right. I'll handle this matter." Professor McGonagall, though puzzled by the odd exchange, nodded and exited the headmaster's office, trusting Dumbledore's judgment. "Really, things are not as they seem," Snape reiterated, his face a shade redder. "Okay, Severus, I understand. There's no need for further explanation," Dumbledore responded, his voice full of understanding, though Snape felt anything but understood. Blake, meanwhile, was reminded sternly by Snape, "Next time you use that dimensional gate to find someone, make sure to announce yourself first. Everyone deserves their privacy." Snape realized that no amount of explanation would change their minds. Moreover, he couldn't help but feel guilty for his actions in his dreams, where he had indulged his desires without restraint. The plan was to publicly state that Snape and Blake were merely training for a duel, a convenient cover story, provided it didn't cause any issues between their families. "And where do you plan to acquire the potions?" Dumbledore inquired, moving the conversation forward. Blake was surprised by Snape's involvement, his expression shifting from excitement to curiosity as he left the headmaster's office. Snape felt a slight relief seeing Blake's change in demeanor. "We'll source the raw materials from the Wholey family and have the Delacour family prepare the potions," Snape explained, dampening Blake's enthusiasm with a dose of reality. Finally, Dumbledore asked, "Blake, have you concluded your business here? And what's this about needing to brew your own magic potion?" Blake seemed puzzled. "Isn't it well known that the Delacour family, including Fleur, sells potions? Why the need to brew your own?" Dumbledore expressed his enthusiasm with a smile. "Your idea is indeed commendable. You approached Severus to discuss partnership on this venture, correct? Do you see this as a promising business model?" he continued, his eyes twinkling with interest. "However, opening a potion shop is not as straightforward as it might seem, especially in Hogsmeade. You must remember, Severus's reputation as a potions master is quite formidable." Blake shared with Dumbledore his motivation for wanting to open a potion shop, to aid those who had suffered losses due to Gilderoy Lockhart's actions. This revelation took Blake by surprise. He hadn't been aware of Dumbledore's intentions. Dumbledore seemed ready to move on from the topic, but after a brief hesitation, he couldn't resist adding, "But doesn't this business model already exist?" Snape, present in the conversation, merely snorted in response, offering no comment. Blake, somewhat embarrassed, admitted, "I hadn't anticipated this. I thought the potions I brewed would suffice." "We're close to finalizing the first step," Blake added optimistically. "Indeed, but considering Severus as a partner, you must acknowledge his significant influence," Dumbledore pointed out. "Yes, the store will soon be operational. Of course, it will require individuals who bear no grudges, Blake agreed, his expression suddenly shifting as a realization struck him. He would need to persuade Cassandra and Fleur, two individuals at odds with each other, to collaborate. So, who will be our supplier? Blake pondered, with neither he nor Snape expressing any reservations about the proposed arrangement. This moment highlighted the complexities and challenges of establishing a potion shop, not just in terms of production, but also in managing relationships and reputations within the magical community.